окупанти до нас в Україну. Форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
Ian, good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 802 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again on the best night of the week. It is Sunday fundraiser night, and it's time for Save the Children. And a big old yeah!
And yeah! And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine as Ukraine has conducted a deep strike behind Russian lines with the special forces in collaboration with the partisans to knock out a Ukrainian collaborator that's been collaborating with occupation forces. We've also been able to hear some amazing and impressive news of battlefield successes that Ukraine has been having in the front lines as the Russian push forward has been stopped today outside of Avdiivka, near to the area of Otriterny, and also near Ankelski. We'll be covering that news here in just a little bit, and also on top of that, we've been able to get other big news of what's been going on outside of Ukraine and inside of Europe as it pertains to the Ukraine war. There is a load that has been going on today, a massive amount, especially on the battlefield level, and we're going to be getting into that in great detail tonight and speaking about what's going on. But before we get into that, I want to make sure that we point out that tonight is the night of all nights on this channel. It is Sunday night. And with every single Sunday night since the dawn of time on this channel, we have always run a fundraiser for a nonprofit that is helping out in Ukraine. And tonight's nonprofit is Save the Children. Save the Children is a massive international organization that has been helping to save the children around the world. They've helped back in the day, at the very beginning of their history, to save hundreds of thousands of children from the clutches of World War II. And even up until the present day, they have had a massive impact helping out children and families around the world, inside of Africa, inside of Southeast Asia, inside of Latin America, inside of Central America, and now their latest project over the past few years has largely been helping out inside of Ukraine, and they have helped to save hundreds of thousands of children inside of Ukraine, and not only that, help out their families massively as well. This is one of the best nonprofits that we can pick because while it is international, the amount of work and help that Save the Children does is by far larger than really most nonprofits that are operating entirely in Ukraine because they're so freaking large. So of course, the goal tonight is $3,000. And if we can hit $3,000, we'll have ensured that the Lee Spring Army has hit a goal once again, and we'll make sure that we keep up the moniker that the Lee Spring Army has never missed a goal and that the Lee Spring Army will never die in any way, shape, or form. But
And man, we're already up to $1,000 raised of the $3,000 goal, so we're already 1/3 of the way there this quickly. It's very impressive to see.
and we cannot wait to see it hit that goal, and I bet you it's going to be coming incredibly soon. But with that, we are now going to be moving on into the frontline news, or more so, the rear line news, because we were able to hear something today in Berdyansk, which is pretty wild. And we have been getting a lot of information about this, and of course, not a lot of it can be corroborated because, of course, from what we understand, this was sort of a special forces operation that was conducted, so there isn't really a lot of information that we have about how it ended up turning out this way, but we were able to see that a Ukrainian collaborator with the Russian Federation was killed today in a car bombing in the city of Berdyansk. We have heard that apparently this person here, Yevhen Ananievsky, was involved in the torture of Ukrainian prisoners and one of the organizers of the death camps on the territory of Berdyansk. It appears that they have ended up meeting their end due to some possible special forces operations and a deep raid that was conducted to supply the partisans with the, I guess you could say, the parts that they needed to be able to bring this all together. I guess you could say the spark plugs were a little too sparky, and it ended up taking out this collaborator. Now, you see the investigator here. We can make sure that they got the back of the vest in the picture, but we can see here they're showing the car, of course, heavily damaged.
Man, it's like one of those old style like mob type killings. Like they turn on the switch and the car just goes kaboom.
It really was. But from what we know, the car actually was driving a good bit before it exploded. So it appears to have had a delay on it, so that we would blow up in the middle of a street. Because from what I know, it didn't blow up anywhere near a house. It actually blew up on a town street in Berdyansk, and ended up taking out the collaborator. But beyond that, we can get a fairly good assumption that the Ukrainians are now going after really any collaborator that they can, no matter how far away they are from the front lines in Ukraine and how far away they are from Ukrainian reach. They were able, I must remind y'all, to get a special forces unit behind the lines that was then able to link up with partisans to supply them with the equipment and weapons that they need. And also, Snow White and DCC Prime are coming in and equipping Save the Children. Snow White throwing in a $300 donation and DCC Prime throwing in $150. Absolutely killing it. And beyond that,
Crazy, man.
not only are they killing the fundraiser, the Ukrainian Special Forces are killing the collaborators. And we do understand that there is a Special Forces unit back behind the lines somewhere that provided the partisans with the bomb they would need to be able to put on the bottom of that car and then end up taking out the collaborator. So this is probably one of the deepest raids that we've ever seen that we know of that could be directly attached to Ukrainian Special Forces over the course of the entire war. And it is incredible to know that they are going to be trying to, I guess you could say, prosecute Ukrainian collaborators as best they can, even in the middle of wartime. But moving on from that, and that big news, probably one of the deepest raids we've ever seen, we're now going to be quickly moving on into the Western world as a whole. And I'm going to let y'all know this because this is amazing news. We were able to get picture proof today, and I'm not sure if we have it on our Twitter. Do we have it, Matthew? It was like a train full of Bradleys. Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you see it before?
I don't think we've reposted that. I don't think we have it on our Twitter.
And sadly, we don't have it on Twitter. Matthew just told me that. I saw it today, and for some reason, I did not put it down on the map, but we were able to see that a massive train car, well, a train load of M2 Bradleys entered Ukraine today, and they are a part of the massive, I believe it was a $6 billion package that is being sent into Ukraine as a part of the $61 billion of aid that was passed by the U.S. government to be sent to Ukraine on in the future. This is huge news, as this means that U.S. equipment is finally starting to flow back into Ukraine at a regular pace, and this also means that the Ukrainian armed forces are going to have a lot more extra equipment and a lot more advanced equipment to be working with here in the future, which is greatly going to help out with their battlefield efficiency. And not only that, help them to be able to knock out more Russian forces, which means that the lines will be held a lot better, even if it is a Russian meat grinder. We have heard, however, that the demand for ammunition inside of Europe has been starting to strain some European countries, because, of course, their ammunition suppliers are only geared to producing interwar amounts of supplies, not the during a wartime of supplies. And we have heard that the Finns are talking about opening up a brand new TNT plant to be able to try and produce all of the TNT that would be needed as explosive propellant or as an actual explosive within the munitions to be used in these artillery shells. This is once again showing that some businesses, or at least some national governments, are starting to see that there is a monetary incentive due to the ongoing war in Ukraine to start ramping up defense production in the forms of TNT, ammunition providers, factories, and other things like that. So this is very interesting to hear, and apparently production of this could begin in around a year or two, roughly, as Brian O'Neill starts producing right now, throwing in a $100 donation to Save the Children, killing it again. Unbelievable. And I gotta say, it is beautiful. It is amazing. And I think the fundraiser has already gotten up to $2,100. It's actually at $2,123. So we are making record speed again tonight on this fundraiser. And speaking of which, we have heard that NATO is considering putting troops on Ukrainian front lines if the situation deteriorates, which is another thing that's starting to sound quite interesting. We've heard this from several different NATO countries. Of course, France is one of the most vocal of these countries. But a lot of people have been seeing that NATO is starting to lean a little bit more and more into that, and possibly showing that they would be behind getting directly involved on the battlefields of Ukraine. And a lot of people have had many different ideas and thoughts about this and what they would think about it. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? Are they for that kind of an idea of sending NATO troops in Ukraine? Are they against it? What is their mindset on that? And what's your mindset on that as well?
Okay, so on this poll question, it says NATO is considering putting troops on the Ukrainian front line if the situation deteriorates any further, and do you support this? 75%, the overwhelming majority, said yes, send in the NATO troops if requested by Ukraine, and 14% said, no, let's not start World War III, and 5% said wait until the very last minute. And on this one right here, this is a very contentious point. I saw people debating this one very heavily on Twitter earlier. And I will say this first off. if NATO sends troops into Ukraine, I think we're going to be almost certainly going into a direct conflict with Russia. That's my personal opinion on the matter. So whenever we decide to do this, we have to be prepared to fight Russia, basically, head on as the West. Also, other countries could get involved with that, including China. It could evolve into a full-on global conflict as well. So that's something we have to keep in mind. But if Ukraine requests it, and basically Ukraine is saying if we don't get help, we're about to be overrun, I'm honestly of the belief we should wait until the very last minute before we do that, because we should try to arm Ukraine and let them fight their own fight. Now, but if it comes down to Ukraine losing or allowing Ukraine to win, I think we should stop Russia from taking over that country. We should stop it, but we shouldn't be so gung-ho to send troops in and get a world war kicked off. I'm not in favor of that right off the bat, but eventually the troops may be needed. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say that, in my opinion, I believe that we should send them in if requested, and if we have information that the situation is now going to lead to a defeat of the Ukrainian armed forces across the entirety of the country. But the fundraisers are going to be freaking defeated because Tom S threw in 100. Hey, let's get it! And we're keeping up that hype because we're about to hit $3,000 here before we've even been on air for about like 10 minutes or so. So this is absolutely insane. But getting on into this, there is a couple of things that we do have to realize here when talking about the implication of getting involved in the war directly and fighting the Russians ourselves. There is a reality out there that people will die in the Western world if we get involved in this conflict. And I also saw the Net Dragon just say that he has children that are of drafting age or of, almost service age. And that is something that everyone does have to remember, that this isn't something that's going to be detached from us at that point if we got directly involved. It's something that people here in the West would be directly dying for. And are you one of those people who would be willing to die for that? Not other people. Would you be willing to die for that personally? And that's kind of a question that one has to ask themselves. Sadly, on a governmental level, they can't really ask that kind of question. That's something that people don't get, is that there's really a divide in between the personal level of people in a country like this, like, would I want to possibly die in a war like this, and the government, which has to go, we have to defend our interests around the world, so people will have to die for that. That's an inevitable certainty. But speaking about it on a governmental level and removing myself and everyone else from the human level, the personal level of having to ask that question, I would have to say that if the Ukrainians just requested it out of the blue, while Nicholas Condor throws in a 300 Canadian, hitting the fundraiser goal. Oh, wait a minute, hang on, sorry, we haven't hit it.
Wait, no, $40 away.
$40 off, we're $40 off. We haven't hit the goal yet. But beyond that, I got a little carried away there. Now I got to collect myself and try to get back into this. On the governmental levels, oh my God, Jimmy Hintz threw in a 300. We hit the goal. Let's go, baby. Oh my Lord, we hit the goal. I wasn't that far off. Okay, it wasn't that bad of a screw, but we hit the goal. Oh my Lord.
Impressive, man. This time it was about, I think, 25 minutes or so into the stream. So not quite the record we had last time. I think last time it was like 10 or 15 minutes or something. It was insane, but super fast once again. We're barely like 25 minutes in and already hitting $3,309. Very impressive.
Man, absolutely insane. And I got to thank everyone for supporting the fundraiser. Of course, the fundraiser isn't over. Y'all can keep supporting if y'all want, but unbelievable. Put an LSA in the chat for hitting $3,000 in 27 minutes. Truly insane. And getting off of that and the absolute hype coming off of blowing through another fundraiser like that again and getting back into the frontline situation, the Ukrainians could ask at any minute if we just say, yeah, let's go. And we do have to consider that if the Ukrainians ask, it might not be a situation where they need the support, they just want it. That's something that we got to be kind of a little bit honest about here, is that if we said, oh yeah, if Ukraine asked for us to send troops in, we would send them in, then Zelensky would literally go immediately, we need troops in Ukraine, and then we'd be like, oh shit, now we have to send them even if the situation isn't bad. Then we involve the Western world in World War III, because it will turn into a world war at that point. So I would have to be entirely honest, I'm not necessarily a big fan of just sending them if requested. I'm a big fan of sending them if requested and the situation is so bad that they're going to lose, then we'll send them forward. Because, that's not a great thing. And also, while a lot of people are gung-ho to defend Ukraine and go to war, you have to remind yourself and always think about this. going off of that mindset, you might be one of those people on the front lines. You might be one of those people that get wounded or killed. And are you willing to get maimed or killed to stand up for what you believe in right here? And if so, make sure when this does break out, if it does, to go down to your local enlistment office and enlist. Because, you know, if you want something, you got to back it up all the way and understand there's a lot of risk and danger with this kind of a idea or a question, more so. Not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that there's a lot that goes with this. So just make sure to keep that in mind and really think about that. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But we have to get into the reason why that might not have to happen anytime soon, because it does appear that Ukrainian forces have been able to stop the Russian advance outside of Avdiivka pretty much to a dead standstill today. And I'm going to be showing y'all this map as we've been seeing it over the past 24 hours. Here is the last 24 hours, and hardly a frontline advance has been made in the area. We've seen a small Russian advance through about half of a field towards Netailove. We've also seen another small advance from the area of Simonivka and Berdichi, but we have not seen any Russian advances in the area of Arkhangelsk or in the area of Otrytene. It does appear that Ukrainian forces have been able to stop the Russian advance at Novoalexandrivka, the area of Sokol, and also Novoselivka Persha, as well as Umanske and maybe Netailove. We don't know about Netailove yet because the fighting has made it into that village at the moment, so we don't know if that village will hold. If not, we'll probably see the Ukrainian forces fall back to Karlivka, as there's a larger reservoir up here that makes sure that it's impassable by Russian forces, and then that means the defensive line will consist of Karlivka, Novoselivka Persha, Yehenivka, and Novoalexandrivka, meaning that the Russian offensive will now be stopped, and there will be enough natural landmarks and barriers to be able to defend with, or at least create choke points where the Russians' numbers advantage at the moment really won't mean much, because it'll just be throwing numbers down into a single pit and then getting them all wiped out. So overall, the situation has massively improved as of the past 24 hours, and we're going to be hoping that it stays this way for quite some time, and that the Ukrainian defensive lines are able to hold strong. We were able to see today a whole bunch of battle action and footage that came out of this area showing what had been going on. Moving on into our first clip, we got to see that an M113 armored personnel carrier that was provided by a Western country, we're not sure if it's the United States or another country that had the M113s, we saw that it was evacuating wounded Ukrainians in the area, and crazily enough, it ended up surviving multiple serious hits, which was wild to see. And so, let's see here. With that, we're going to be moving on into the clip. I had to check something really quickly there. And by the way, I believe that this is being filmed by the Russians, so keep that in mind. They're wanting to see this little APC get knocked out. It's a Ukrainian one, but we're about to see this thing survive an unbelievable amount. So here's the clip. The Russians are going crazy.
This has got to be the Russians yelling like this in the background, like they always act crazy.
It's just screaming out of the blue. And we can see the Ukrainians moving out, and the M113 takes its first hit. This is such a big explosion, you would think that this M113 is down and out for the count.
Oh my
It's
God.
not.
Man, the Russians are acting like this is their only hit of the war.
It probably is their only hit of the entire freaking war. You gotta think about it, Matthew. These guys are dying in the hundreds every single day, and the Ukrainians, as far as the size of their armed forces goes, and also the confirmed losses we get about them on a day-to-day basis at this point, they're elusive. They're incredibly elusive to be able to hit or knock out at all, especially vehicles, because we actually, I don't say this a lot on air, but I do keep track of Ukrainian losses behind the scenes, so that way we can make sure that if things are going incredibly badly, we can make sure to point it out to y'all. But at the moment, from what I'm seeing, based off of people who have been able to gather up all the video evidence they get every single day, among many other things, and compile the amount of Russian vehicular losses and Ukrainian vehicular losses, the Russians are losing 9 vehicles for every 1 vehicle that Ukraine is losing at the moment. element across all categories. So we're talking about anything in between a pickup truck up to a main battle tank. Anything that falls in between that is being called a vehicle, and right now the Ukrainians are losing practically none. So for the Russians to, well, and when I say none, I mean they're losing about 6 of them a day across a 500-mile wide front line. The Russians are losing, I think it's something like 60 vehicles confirmed per day right now, something along those lines. It's even higher than that, I believe. But the ratio in between Ukrainian losses and Russian losses is extreme. So for the Russians to be able to hit any vehicle, it's a miracle from the Lord for them. So we can see that they went wild. And you would think from that explosion, this M113 would be knocked out. It does have extremely thin armor. But the Ukrainians are still running in. And they hit it again. We see a couple of guys go running off. But notice there's no real fire that's being caused on this M113 yet. A little bit of smoke coming off, but no fire.
Man, it's kind of surprising, like, and it's also a good thing. It doesn't appear the Ukrainians have gotten injured during all of these hits. It seems like the guys that were like right next to it when it got struck actually like jumped in the vehicle, and then none of them actually got like injured from what I could tell.
Yeah, and also notice this, Matty. This is the part where you know the Russians are cheering like they just got a hit, but it's all about to be lost and thrown to the wind, because look at this. Right there, the engine still runs. So the M113 is about to kick it out of here, and there's going to be absolutely nothing that the Russians can do at that point. My God. Dude, they're all like, dude, they're literally all saying bitch because it's starting to leave. Well, you see the back door is still down. Yeah, the back door is still down, but they're closing it. This is taking them some time, precious time.
Like drive, man, like press the gas.
Well, you see some of the Ukrainian soldiers coming out and hopping into the back of the APC as the door is still open.
Man, no wonder the Russians can't coordinate squat. If this is the extent of their like, oh my God, man, if this is the extent of their like ability to organize a hit, this is pathetic. Like, this is chaos.
It's just raw chaos, man. I don't think they have any coordination at all. But this explosion ended up blowing up near the rear of the M113. The Russians cheer again. I see another Ukrainian running off into the tree line here. But y'all wouldn't believe it. It was literally the luckiest hit that could have ever happened. The FPV drone blew up under the door at the back of the vehicle. So the entire group of Ukrainians that is climbing in the vehicle that were over the top, which was all of them at that point when it exploded, were protected from the shrapnel. So none of them got wounded. Of course, there were wounded that were loaded into the M113 at the beginning of the video, but none of the Ukrainians that you just saw right there got wounded, which is practically a miracle from God. Like, I don't even know how that happened, because really, in all honesty, some of them should have been wounded in that explosion. It happened right beside them, but the rear large door that was wide open protected all of them. Well, you see the engine spooling up again, and the M113 is now starting to move again. Once again, defying the Russian mind, because they can't comprehend that the vehicle is still operational somehow after multiple FPV drone hits. Another one. And we see the Ukrainians now firing at the incoming FPV drones.
There's barely even a scuff on the tank or the vehicle.
I know, right? Like, well, I don't even know what these bombs are made out of, but we see that they have the door almost completely closed. And we see a Russian trying to fire at it. He throws a grenade, and the grenade missed and blew up under the M113. So once again, no one has been injured.
Man, I do have to say though, like, this was a very rough situation for the Ukrainians to find themselves in. Like, they're surrounded basically.
And we see the back of the M113 has caught on fire. The Russian throws another grenade. And this grenade, unfortunately, looks like it finally blew up in the back of the M113. But it looks, and also I want to point this out, the rear door on the back door of the M113 has been swung wide open, which is showing that at some point the Ukrainians, of course this was cut out, abandoned the vehicle. So from what we would know, there wouldn't be any Ukrainians in there, or hardly any of them, and they were able to once again make it out of the M113, and the M113 survived every single FPV drone hit and one grenade that ended up hitting this M113. This is far more than you could ever expect from an M113. The vehicle has practically no armor to speak of. It can deflect small arms fire, but if you use armor-piercing rounds, they are going to punch straight through the side of the vehicle. Even 7.62 by 39 would be able to punch through the side of an M113. So the fact that they were able to take multiple hits of this M113, and it was able to survive long enough that a large amount of the Ukrainians, probably all of them, were able to bail out of the back of the M113 is a raw miracle. We don't know how it happened, but this M113 did its job. Moving on from that and into our next clip in the area, we also got to see that a Ukrainian M2 Bradley ended up getting hit today by a Russian Lancet drone, and once again, it survived. The brought armor additions to the side of the Bradley ended up insulating it from the hit, and the Bradley survived the attack. Here is the clip. There's the Bradley, gets hit by the Lancet.
Oh. Smashed.
That looked like a pretty strong hit. And the smoke clears, and the Bradley is still operational.
Man, what are they making these Bradleys out of these days? Like titanium or something?
Something like that. Well, they're making them out of broad armor packages, like you can see right there. And these things are apparently able to really protect the Bradleys against any kind of non-kinetic rounds, like the one we just saw that FPV drone hit with the Lancet. So this is absolutely crazy. I mean, it's nuts to see. It's incredible to see that a Bradley was able to survive a hit like that. And once again, showing that American engineering does have its advantages over anything that the Russians have out there on the field right now. This stuff does incredibly well. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Very nice to see. And moving on from that into the next clip, we also got to see that the Ukrainians were able to knock out a Russian tank in the area. Credit to the 47th of Magura that was able to conduct this strike. Here's the Russian tank, and there it goes. Immediately into a pyre. That's very different than even the M113 that we just saw that got hit by multiple FPV drones and ended up surviving. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there. We can also see that we had a small turret toss occur, but nevertheless, that tank did not survive, and the 47th Brigade appears to have shown the difference in between American engineering that emphasizes survivability and Soviet engineering that emphasizes nothing. Moving on from that into the area of Novobad-Makivka, we also got to see that another Muron-M surveillance system in the region was hit incredibly hard, making sure to knock out more Russian surveillance and make their abilities to analyze the battlefield a lot more difficult. When you see the drone coming on in, there's the Muron right there in the opening of the tower, and they hit it dead on, destroying the Muron-M system and making sure that their surveillance abilities, or at least reconnaissance abilities, are going to be further impeded. And we see the Muron-M system is literally gone, and that's the end of the clip. But very nice to see that they were able to once again knock out another surveillance system in the area. Moving on into Semenivka, we were also able to see that the Russians ended up getting hit by a FPV drone down here. But nevertheless, here are the clips. We can see a large amount of Russians here, and we can see that this is actually filmed by the famous 3rd Brigade. And there they all are. They're crawling through the fields. It looks like quite a large amount, maybe an entire squad. But now the Ukrainians are about to do what's called getting a quad by dropping this drone down right on top of at least 4 of them, and that's what's called a quad.
Now I'm just saying, this is just me, but in this scenario, like an A-10 strafing this area, I mean, I don't know, man. That could be a good use.
I don't know, man. I mean, maybe you got a point. Maybe. Let's talk about it in the chat, y'all. Do y'all think an A-10 would be good here or not? But look at that. That's a quad. And when you see another Russian here making a run for it, Oh, Bliet, I don't want my contract to last much longer, Bliet. And it will not last longer, whether he wanted it to or whether the Russians didn't want it to. And... bing, and he's gone. Bing, a second time. And with that, that's the end of that clip, but very nice to see that the Ukrainians are making sure to slow down the Russian advance as best they can and continue to inflict casualties on Russian forces, so that way they're tied up doing their own things, trying to just, survive, I suppose. Moving on from that and down near Tenenke, we also got to see that a Russian soldier ended up somehow dodging multiple drones, mortars, and artillery fire. This is, of course, a video made by the Russians, but just giving a general overview of what the battlefield is looking like at the moment. There was this small, absolutely insane to find the kind of odd sort of thing that happened to one Russian soldier today in the area. When you see him running right there. I'm not really sure if he's on a motorbike or running at this point because the camera quality isn't that good, but he did make it through one artillery explosion already at the beginning of the clip.
Man, that seems like a motorbike. Like, I see some dirt flying up behind him.
It's a motorbike.
Ah, a motor car.
Oh yeah, we can't do that. We'll get copyrighted. But anyways,
and then the weasels appeared. I would like to buy that car.
Another explosion happened, man. Did you see this? And it looks like the dirt
bike got knocked off.
Oh, it looks like the dirt bike might be out.
Uh-oh, he can't lift it. He's weak. He's weak.
He's weak. Feeble. It's all that mud water.
Now, if anybody's ridden a motorcycle, you'll know you need to put your back toward the bike and lift it up like backwards, not front ways like that. You can't lift it. So that guy clearly doesn't know what he's doing.
And now we can see that they decided to ditch the dirt bike and they're making a run for it.
Oh, that's really good right there. They're going to make it far doing this.
Well, actually, they do end up surviving the entire clip, so they will make it far. And so we can see them booking it.
That was serious, man.
Apparently going on foot is safer than on the motorbike. I'm assuming. I don't know. But we can see him continuing to make his way down the road. And it's kind of weird how the Russians wasted an entire drone on the front line to film one of their guys going through Wipeout frontline version. I don't know how... Oh, and another explosion. Looks like this one missed him again, and he's still trucking along. This guy ended up having a miracle happen as well. Miracles just happen on the front line today as just kind of a standard. The best way I can explain it for Ukrainians and Russians alike. Well, you can see this little fella right here running around. And someone said, hey,
he's getting overwhelmed by the mud pit right here. He's like, oh, this is my home, Bliat. So much trash and so much debris. I can't leave it.
He's like, oh, this reminds me of my beautiful home in Novocherbinsk, Bliat. Beautiful Novocherbinsk. We don't even have place to crap, but very nice. And someone said, hey, Enforcer, why don't you go over? Well, why are you here? Like, why are you still here? Why don't you go over, pal? And we can see the artillery hit right near the Russian. And stand by. Hold on.
Where'd he go?
He disappeared. But
Oh.
he survived.
Oh, he's in the hole.
Yeah, he's in a...
He looked out and said, he looked out, man, was coughing up dust. Am I alive?
Dude. So somehow the guy ended up surviving the entire ordeal. I don't know how, but, the guy ended up getting a little bit of a miracle happening to him as well. Moving on from that and down into the area of Pisky, we also got to see that the 58th Brigade was destroying some Russian armor and equipment down in this area of the Avdiivka battlefield as well. We're going to be muting that because I could already hear from that riff, it was very copyrighted. Something AC/DC. But we can see here the Russians out there in that field. Oh my lord. That was a pretty heavy hit. And when you see the vehicle still rolling on and knocked out, it was a BTR APC. And another hit. And another one.
Oh. I think he busted his tire.
Man, they punctured his rims. I mean, his oh my god.
Oh, it's a nuke. Look at that. Mushroom cloud and all.
Man, Todd Howard would be happy with this. That might be called a mini nuke. But anyways, that's the end of that clip right there for the large part. We now see the debris, and then we, of course, get the outro. But very nice to see that they were able to once again hit another Russian armor, another piece of Russian armor in the area, and make sure to slow down that offensive just a little bit more. Overall, I'm going to make sure to explain to y'all what we're seeing on this battlefield at the moment, and what we are going to be expecting from the upcoming weeks and months. Russian forces are attempting to advance from the area of Otrytine further north and west towards the area of Vesely and Avdiivka on their way towards the village of Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad. We're understanding that they're most likely trying to advance forwards through these fields so that way they can try and cover one of the main advances that is happening further south near Netailove at the moment, or Pervomaiske, as Russian forces are trying to use this as their main logistical corridor, the E50 motorway, towards the town of Pokrovsk. We also understand that at the exact same time, Russian forces are also fighting in the town of Krasnoyarivka and are attempting to advance even further and more forwards into the area of Hrink and Zrine. This is also to make sure that there are two large pincers that are moving directly parallel to the E50 highway, both to the north and the south, which will make sure to put pressure onto the Ukrainian center defensive lines, where they will end up falling back and giving up more territory. This means that while the battles in the peripheries in Krasnoyarivka and Otrytine seem to be somewhat marginal, at least in their importance, they are actually the most important parts of this battlefield at the moment. The center doesn't really matter that much, because the flanks collapse is going to force the Ukrainians in the center line to end up having to fall back further down the highway and towards the town of Pokrovsk. We're going to be, of course, seeing that the Russian forces understand this, and there are a couple of advantageous bits of terrain that we have seen them already taking advantage of, and we expect that they'll continue to take advantage of. Particularly the large amount of tree lines that exist near the railways that travel past the area of Otrytine. We do believe that Russian forces are continuing to use this as a corridor for their advance, so that way they can try and move closer and closer to the town of Pokrovsk. Meanwhile, in the southern area near Krasnoyarivka, we understand that the offensive is going to be a lot more difficult in this area due to the amount of lakes, and also due to the fact that there is really no advantageous tree lines to be able to move down on the Russian side. This means that Ukrainian defenders will be able to hold the southern flank near Krasnoyarivka a lot better in this Russian offensive at the moment, and will be able to stop their advance there. But in the area of Otrytine, Ukrainian forces are going to be posed with the challenge of stopping the Russians from continuing to move rapidly down the tree line that surrounds the railroad berm, and to try and stop them from continuing their advance. This means that as far as a troop priority is concerned for any flank on the front line, the south, center, or the northern flank will probably be where Ukrainian forces would be best suited to put a large amount of their forces in, as this will be the most difficult area to try and hold the Russians back at. If the Ukrainians are able to hold the Russians back and inflict a high amount of losses onto the Russians in this area, this most likely means that they will be shifting their forces either into the center flank or the southern flank to try and continue their advances in those directions, although still, those areas are posing a large amount of difficulty. Not only that, but within the area of Karlivka and Zrine, we do understand that Ukrainian forces are going to most likely create some sort of a bottleneck for advancing Russian forces and end up inflicting high casualties, as a Russian advance into Kurakove would actually put them south of the main offensive that would be heading towards Pokrovsk, and that means that they would actually have to fight forwards and around the lake while not actually posing any problem to the Ukrainian defenders that would be on the northern sides of the lake until after they got around, meaning that their golden window of opportunity to push the Ukrainians off of the center would be lost, as Ukrainian reinforcements would most likely move once again further south and into Kurakove to stop the Russians there. Going off of all of this, we are understanding that the Russians may be able, in this one instance, to actually start pushing the Ukrainians back a little bit on the E50 highway. However, if the Ukrainians do divert their resources properly, which we'll never know because usually actual troop dispersions in minutia are never explained, but if they do move a large amount of their forces into the area around Otrytine and attempt to hold that tree line area around the railroads, they probably will be able to completely stop Russian advances further, because this flank will not progress along with the flank down near Krasnoyarivka, meaning that the center will most likely never be pushed back due to a threat of encirclement. And so
Do you think that this is the area right here where the little part is where Russia's kind of made a small dent in the front line, trying to get to Pokrovsk? Could that be maybe the propaganda victory that Russia may be trying to secure before May the 9th?
I don't think that they're trying to secure Pokrovsk before May 9th, because they only have 4 more days to do it, and there's no way that they can advance on Pokrovsk in 4 days, because Pokrovsk, as the crow flies, is currently about 18 to 19 miles away from the current front line. The closest it is at Otrotine. And right now they're advancing about 300 to 200 meters per day in some areas when the conditions are incredibly good. So going off of that, in the next 4 days, if they continued on advancing without any resistance at around 300 meters per day, that means that they would make it about another kilometer, which is about 0.7 miles. So they make it about that much farther down the railroad. So they're not going to be making it towards Pokrovsk anytime soon.
Yeah,
that would mostly... Go ahead.
That's a bit of a leap. But I wonder, though, where along the front line, because Putin has told the forces in Russia to secure something that's a propaganda victory. And right now, that little dent right there is probably nothing to brag about for their Victory Day parade. So I'm not really sure where along the front line Russia's actually going to be able to take anything of significance to even say that they had some kind of victory. So do you have any idea where they might be talking about, or are they going to be empty-handed this year?
They may just be attempting to outflank Ukrainian forces near to the area of Karlivka, so that way they can end up announcing that there was a victory and they push the Ukrainians back, and they're going to keep pushing them back. That may be the success they're looking at in this area. But at the exact same time, Oleksandr Syrskyi has stated that Russian forces are also attempting to take the town of Chasiv Yar, which is the high point in the entire area. It's in the highest elevation, and that means that the Russians are able to take it. They will now control the heights over Konstantinivka, which could be a major propaganda, well, not a major propaganda victory, but a propaganda victory that would be big enough to be mentioned on May 9th. So it could be one or the other. That may be why they're going for both of them, and so that way they can claim that Ukrainian forces were pushed back near Avdiivka heavily, like they were almost encircled, or to try and take Chasiv Yar, one or the other. That's what we're understanding right now. But nevertheless, some U.S. analysts have said that Ukraine is actually preparing its own offensive in 2025, and some analysts have said that it's impossible for Ukraine to do this. And some people have had some interesting thoughts on this. Some people believe that Ukraine will mount an offensive by then. Some people say that it really depends on Western support and how much they'll be getting. Some people are actually saying that Ukraine is not prepared for an offensive by 2025, and some people don't really know which answer they want to go with. But Matthew, what are people saying about this as far as Ukraine being able to conduct this offensive? Will they be able to do it, or will they not be able to do that? And what do you think about it?
Okay, so we have heard today from Jake Sullivan that Ukraine is allegedly preparing for a major offensive in 2025 in the early part of the year, around January, February or so. But some analysts are very vehement about the fact they're saying it's impossible for Ukraine to do that. So what are your thoughts? 50% said that Ukraine will mount an offensive by then. 33% said it depends 100% on the West. And then 9% said Ukraine won't be prepared for an offensive. And to me, I saw the analysts arguing earlier. I've read all their arguments to try to see if they had any valid points. And to be honest, I disagree almost completely with that, because the analysts are basically revolving their arguments around Russia's ability to manufacture tons of equipment and basically not run out by the end of the year. That to me is a fallacy. I think Russia's going to be hurting big league for equipment by the end of 2024 and going into 2025. And Ukraine is not going to be super well equipped, because they are going to run through a lot of equipment during the summer, during holding off the Russian hordes. But they will have more equipment, in my opinion, than Russia will have after the equipment's been exhausted throughout the year. So I think Ukraine is going to be totally prepared for an offensive by then. And there's no reason to say that Ukraine's suddenly down and out. We have seen Ukraine perform counteroffensives in the past. They haven't gone exactly to plan, but they were successful in their own right. So I'm actually disagreeing with the analysts quite a bit on this one. I'm going to say that Ukraine will definitely mount an offensive by then, if not earlier. But Enforcer, what say you?
I believe the Ukrainians will mount an offensive by late fall of this year. That's what I would assume, because the Ukrainians are taking losses, but we do have to remember that they're not as high as the Russians again. And at some point, Russian forces will reach a state of strategic or really battlefield exhaustion, and will require to be able to sit by and then get resupplied on in the future. Because while the Russians are claiming that the war industry is massively ramped up in the Russian Federation, that is not the case. We just know that that's not the case based off of what we're seeing at the front lines. So going off of that, we know that the Ukrainians are probably going to be able to hold off the Russian offensives until those offensives get exhausted, and then they'll have to sit by and wait for further resupplies. That means that the Ukrainians during that time will be able to conduct a counteroffensive of their own. Due to the Russians not really being logistically able to conduct an offensive, that will automatically put them into a defensive position in the course of a Ukrainian attack. That also means that they have less supplies to work off of during that Ukrainian offensive, which once again makes that an opportune time. And we know that these offensives that the Russians are conducting are not going to be going on all the way until the end of this year. So overall, I would say that it's most likely going to happen in late fall. We also know that the United States is supporting Ukraine with, once again, billions and billions of dollars of U.S. military support. $6 billion of equipment is starting to arrive in Ukraine just right now as of today. And $6 billion back at the beginning of the war was such a godsend that it was able to allow the Ukrainians to conduct the Kherson counteroffensive and also, to a very small extent, the Kharkiv counteroffensive as well. So going off of that, I would say that they're certainly going to be conducting an offensive probably by late fall of this year, but not by the early part of next year, and it's certainly not impossible for the Ukrainians either. To say that it's impossible for the Ukrainians means that the war is lost at this point, because they're not able to conduct an offensive, but the Russians are able to keep conducting offensives. That means they will eventually get pushed back and be completely defeated. And that seems a little bit weird, I'm not going to lie, for a lot of analysts to go from saying, because a lot of these are the same analysts who said Ukraine can win the war now because they are getting pushed back a little bit near Avdiivka, to now saying they're going to lose the war entirely. Because where in the world was that defeatist attitude in Bakhmut? Where was that defeatist attitude in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk? And where was that defeatist attitude when the Ukrainians conducted the successful counterattacks in the Kharkiv area and also in Kherson? That was nowhere to be seen, because it's not reflective of the real life situation. And also another thing is that saying that the Ukrainians are going to not be able to conduct an offensive is also showing that the Russians are doing way too well than they really are. Because for us to send $6 billion of equipment, which isn't $61 billion, but still 10% of it, and then for us to say, oh, well, they still might lose the war, or they might not be able to conduct an offensive and they will most likely end up losing the war because they're just going to continuously be pushed back, that doesn't make any sense to say that now, and then also have known that probably just a little while ago, and then provide them with another $61 billion of support in military equipment. Because if they are going to lose inevitably at this point, according to the military analysts, why in the world would we send them anything? They were going to lose 2 months ago, then why in the world would we give them more? It's a lost cause. Keep the equipment and give it to someone else that is going to need it and going to survive. That's why it doesn't make sense as well, because we've already gone off of, if they give more support, they will be able to turn this around and continue to win the war. And then we give them support, and then the military analysts go, oh, actually, they're going to lose the war because they can't conduct an offensive anyways. Those are two completely opposite things, and shows that they're just saying crap to say it. So with that...
And also, by the way, another thing the analysts were basically premising their argument on was not only the fact that Russia can allegedly, and it's a lie, Russia can allegedly manufacture tons of military equipment and basically replenish their stocks without running out by the end of the year, which, like I said, is false. The analysts are also premising their entire argument on the fact that Ukraine... Damn, I just totally lost my thought just then, man. I just totally left my head. Let me think for a second. Let's see. They're totally premising their argument on the fact that Ukraine is not going to receive any more Western aid, which is totally false as well. Ukraine is going to get more aid. They gave about $61 billion just a short while ago, and Ukraine is going to receive more. The mere fact that NATO's discussing maybe putting troops on the ground inside of Ukraine, that indicates to me that the West is not going to allow Ukraine to lose going into the future. And also, the analysts were basically trying to suggest and assume that the $61 billion that went to Ukraine already was basically the end of support, and that's not simply true either. So to me, it's pretty much a done deal that Ukraine will be funded into the future. They're not going to run out of equipment, but I think Russia will.
And also another thing, someone said, they can't say they will win, otherwise they'll get no more aid. That's not true at all, because they get more aid so that way they'll win the war. The government doesn't work off of, okay, they're winning, so to hell with these people. Like, that's not how we work. We go, okay, they're winning, so let's keep giving them stuff to push them over the top, because that's how we did it in Afghanistan. We sat there and installed the government in Afghanistan, and then we said, okay, it looks like they're doing good. Let's give them more equipment. Okay, it looks like they might actually be able to take on the Taliban, although everyone knew they couldn't. Let's give them more equipment. Let's give them more. Okay, it looks like now that we've given them enough equipment, we can leave, and they'll be able to keep the Taliban under control. Okay, goodbye. Oh, shit, they fell apart. And then that's when everyone was like, oh my God, we just left so much equipment over there, because in reality, it wasn't American equipment that we had left over there that was being controlled by the U.S. military. It was American equipment that we had given to the Afghan government that ended up falling into Taliban hands because they ended up collapsing literally within the course of 2 months. So when you put it like that, you can see that it doesn't make a lot of sense to say something like that. And I'm not saying that you're completely wrong, but what I am saying is that if they're winning, they will continue to get support because you don't want to sit there and go, okay, they're winning, so let's just cut off the pipeline of support to them and then let them start losing again, and then we'll support them again. The war will end. We will end up giving them support and end up helping them out until the war ends, and then it's over. Because in World War II, there's a good example, when the Soviet Union started winning and started pushing the Nazi Germans back out of the Soviet Union and towards Germany in 1943, we didn't say from that point forward, as America, okay, they're winning, let's just cut off the Lend-Lease. We actually sent them more equipment at that point, from 1943 to 1945 on a yearly basis, than we had in the year before, 1942, when the Lend-Lease began for the Soviet Union. So going off of that, I would say that we're going to continue to support them based off of the historical precedent. Also, it would make no logical sense for them to start winning because we give them support, and then for us to cut it off because they're winning. It's like a negative feedback loop. It doesn't really make too much sense. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And we're about to start moving on into the rest of the frontline news and also the location unknowns, which were pretty wild today. But before we get into all of that, we do have to take a moment to thank some of the top donors of this fundraiser tonight who have been able to get it up to $4,400, because that is unbelievable. That is absolutely impressive. And we've got to thank y'all all so much once again for helping this channel to keep on making these fundraisers as amazing and incredible as they are. And not only that, to have such a massive impact and help out. I wish we could call out each and every one of y'all, but sadly that would be infeasible. So we only get to call out the top donors who put in over $50 to the fundraiser. But Matthew, take it away.
All right, so we have a very long list of top donors for the night, and our first one is from Snow White, who put in a $300 donation, along with a Nicholas Conder and also Jimmy Hintz, and those are the three largest donations of the night thus far. And huge shout out to Snow White, Nicholas, and also Jimmy for that massive support of Save the Children, and also huge shout out to BC Skyman. He put in a $250, along with DCC Prime 1, who put in a $150, and then we have a $100 donation from some guy called the Enforcer, who just happens to hang around the channel a whole lot. And we also have a 100 from Say What, Old Warrior, Andy L, Plant Lady, Brian O'Neill, Tom S, Say What once again, and then we have a 100 from Autocross 101 and Just Chillin', and then we have a 63 from Andy L once more, and then a 50 from Axel K, Rad Doctor, Ned Dragon, Greg Carrier, Neil Vizanot, Mike Smith, Panama Floyd, Rich T, also Destiny Edgington, Matt Cheer, Notorious GRG, Gene Kustra, and also Dad Good. And huge shout out to all the top donors of the night and everyone else that donated as well, because we're now up to $4,418 in the fundraiser. And a huge shout out to you all for actually taking us well above goal. We're about $1,400 above goal at this point, and it's all thanks to the LSA as usual. So thank you all very much for that. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank each and every one of y'all for helping out this fundraiser tonight. Save the Children is an amazing nonprofit that helps out around the entire world, but they've been doing massive work inside of Ukraine and helping to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of children. And it's an absolutely incredible thing to see that so many people have supported this nonprofit tonight and are helping it to keep on doing what it does, because that helps out incredibly. Huge shout out to Joseph Anjanako as well, who just threw in a 100 into the fundraiser, making sure that it gets all the way up to $4.5 thousand raised. It is truly incredible to see something like this, and I got to thank y'all all so much once again for being a part of this fundraiser and helping it out and helping to make this thing possible. Another thing that I have to say is I thank y'all for helping out Save the Children as a nonprofit in particular, because one thing that has been very interesting to me over the course of the war is that some people have ended up knocking international nonprofits like Save the Children, because Save the Children doesn't just work in Ukraine, it also works in every corner of the world, helping to save the children literally wherever children are, which is literally everywhere in the world. So they end up helping out in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, in Latin America, Central America, you name it. They are out there everywhere. But they are a massive organization. And while they're helping out everywhere, they do help out in Ukraine as well. And I've been looking around because I've been trying to see, because some people say that supporting international organizations like that isn't good because hardly any of the money makes it to Ukraine. And so I decided to look into that a little bit more and see how much help does Save the Children conduct in Ukraine versus, say, another nonprofit, you know, like a nonprofit that only works entirely in Ukraine. And I actually found out that because international nonprofits are so large, like Save the Children, they end up helping out hundreds of thousands of children in Ukraine, while some Ukrainian-based nonprofits only, that only do Ukraine, end up helping out maybe tens of thousands of people, but not hundreds of thousands. And so I got to say, I thank everyone for getting behind the fundraisers that we support because, you know, there's always a decent amount of people out there just disagreeing with anything. And it's good to know that people do know that things like Save the Children help out massively in Ukraine and also help out massively around the world as well. But for the scope of this channel, it's really all about what Save the Children does inside of Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you so much, everyone, once again, for supporting all of the top donors and all of the donors we weren't able to call off. Thank you to each and every one of y'all. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into a couple of questions really quickly, and then we're going to be getting back into the news.
All right, and our first question of the night is actually not a question. It's actually the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight, like always, we had the entire roster. We had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J., Rumpelstiltskin, David Millsaps, and also Toxic Bananas. They said the LSA Signal Corps says tonight's Morse code dispatch is Ukraine is conducting a raid to take out a collaboration. It's pretty wild stuff. And long live the LSA.
And that's the sound
Dang,
of
that's
money.
the sound of Nicholas Condor putting in a 200 Canadian.
Damn! It's a great segue. Impressive. And Nicholas Condor killing it with the 200 and putting in 4,000. Well, actually, the fundraiser's now gotten up to $4,664. Unbelievable. Absolutely insane. And thank you, Nicholas Condor, for putting that in. And speaking of which, that is the sound of money. Y'all hit the jackpot, and that was the Morse code message of the night. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 802nd day of the war. Really impressive stuff. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and this question is going to go to Gold, who says, should France go in militarily to Ukraine to take back all occupied territories, and what assets should, according to you, be sent where?
I would have to say that the French army, it's a very tough thing to say because a lot of people like to think of it in a simple binary metric of yes or no. And consequences of actions are very rarely considered by people who say yes or no. If we say no, the war in Ukraine could drag on a lot longer. That could end up damaging the Russians even further, but at the same time, that could end up damaging Ukraine a lot further as well. And that means that investment opportunities are not going to make as great a return. And also some people are going to say, oh my God, that's so crass. I'm talking about it on a governmental level. It's going to sound really crass. There's not going to be that great of a return on an investment from any investors. And not only that, the Ukrainian government will most likely be very cash-strapped by the end of the war as well. And if we're trying to pull them into NATO and the European Union, that's not going to bode too well because the European Union used to take everyone who wanted to be in the EU, but now they've gotten very selective because they found out after the Greek financial collapse that the entirety of the EU economy could tank if one country goes down. So they have to make sure that these countries have at least stable economies to be able to make sure that they don't end up taking down the entire ship with them if they were to collapse. So going off of that, there are a lot of cons to not supporting Ukraine and helping them out, at least on a governmental level, but also helping them out comes with a lot of consequences as well. Mainly, if France was to help out, and then France ended up being directly attacked by, say, Russian missiles, or Russian missiles started to fly into NATO and we shot those down, that would invoke Article 4, Article 5, and Article 6 of the NATO Charter, and that means that we would most likely see that a world war would break out across the entire continent and end up starting to pose some really serious issues as far as the world is concerned. This means, for a small while, and when I say a small while, maybe 2 months, Russian naval assets would be running wild trying to sink any kind of commercial shipping that they could find in the world. And while we would end up containing them, during that month or two, a decent amount of merchant vessels could most likely be sunk, and the damage that is caused by a single merchant vessel sinking in the modern world is unbelievable compared to what it was in World War II. Because in World War II, when, of course, the sinking of merchant shipping was a big deal, there were thousands, tens of thousands, endless amounts of ships. But in the modern day, many companies have decided that it's a lot more economical to build the ships to be far larger, requiring really the same crew that would be needed for a smaller ship, but being able to carry an unbelievably larger amount of cargo at the exact same time, which greatly reduces operating costs and also greatly reduces logistical headache as well for these companies. So having several merchant ships go down in the modern day could end up being a pretty bad deal for the West. You would see that a lot of consumer goods would probably disappear completely. You would probably see that a lot of luxuries would end up disappearing over the next year or 2 years, while those supply chains would try and recover, or they would try and find a way to fill it in. Not only that, but once the Russians are contained, at least on the naval level, then we have the ground war that we have to deal with inside the Baltics and Poland, where the Russians may be able to get an upper hand advantage at the beginning, but we would of course start to defeat them probably within the first few weeks, and then over the course of several months, we would probably have pushed them back and have started to push into Belarus and into Russia, meaning that now the Russians would be greatly concerned of some kind of a nuclear war that would most likely happen. They would probably start to lob tactical nuclear weapons at U.S. forces or NATO forces on the ground inside of Russia and also inside the Baltics and the rest of Europe, which would end up making us use our tactical nuclear weapons, and then we would see that would most likely turn into an intercontinental ballistic missile exchange. Meaning that would be Armageddon and the end of everything. So overall, you can see that there are some pros and cons to getting involved and not getting involved, but let's just say that the French get involved, just for the sake of this argument, so that way we can really talk about what a French involvement would look like. Let me go pull up the French army structure, and let me show you what the French are working with. So this is a French army structure. Of course, they have multiple different divisions. Probably one of the more interesting things, though, that we could really talk about is that not all of this could go to Ukraine. The French army, I believe, is about 190,000 strong, so it's smaller than the Lee Spring army, but the entire thing could not end up going to Ukraine. There has to be some stuff that is kept inside of France to make sure to continue to train more recruits, more conscripts, and also to make sure that the logistical chains are able to operate from beginning to end. So speaking of combat units that could be sent, the 1st Division over here, this entire division would probably get sent to Ukraine. So everything included in that, really, the 7th Brigade, the 9th Brigade, the 27th Brigade, and the Franco-Allemand Brigade would all be sent into Ukraine, most likely immediately. We would probably see that the 3rd Division over here would also get sent, which includes the 2nd Brigade, the 6th Brigade, and the 11th Brigade. The 11th Brigade, however, being mostly a light infantry brigade comprised of airborne forces, such as the parachutists. So going off of that, they have a decent amount to offer. They also have a decent amount of armor inside the French army. You can see that there's a large amount of armored groups that are in the 7th, the 9th, the 2nd, and the 6th. So they would be very well supported. And we do know that those would do incredibly well within the area of eastern Ukraine, because that's really where armor would thrive. We also know that the French Air Force is incredibly advanced as well. Probably a lot of that would be forward deployed into Poland or Ukraine to help out the ground forces. And so overall, the French on a, and also let me make sure that I'm getting this correct, because I do believe that there is a support unit somewhere over here, somewhere a support division. And let me see here. Here's this is kind of logistics. And so let's see here. I'm trying to go over here. Let's see. This appears to be recruiting units, possibly. These also appear to be some sort of like a National Guard force, possibly, because it says that these are territorial of something, so I would believe that these are probably some sort of a National Guard of France. So going off of that, really the 1st and 3rd divisions would be the one to enter Ukraine. We would probably see the rest of these either in supporting roles inside of Ukraine or inside of France, making sure that their supply lines are able to operate from France to Ukraine. So they would be able to move in a good amount. These units would probably all get put onto the Zaporizhia front line, or they would end up getting put into the area of Luhansk, because that would probably be the places where the French could make progress. To be entirely honest, the French could be a little bit bold, although this would be very difficult even for the French to pull off. and they could try and conduct a Dnipro River crossing down in the area of Kherson, because the French do have enough logistical forces baked into their military that they could lay down enough Bailey bridges and also other kinds of bridges to be able to allow for the logistics flow and also armed forces flow over the Dnipro to actually happen in a large enough and sizable enough number that they could actually get onto the other side of the Dnipro River and seriously threaten the weak Russian positions that are here. The problem with that, though, is that, of course, there's still the massive march that would have to be dealt with, and no one really has a good way to deal with that at the moment, not even the French. So going off of all of this, I would say that they would most likely end up in eastern Ukraine. We would probably see that the combat divisions are moved in the 1st and the 3rd. The rest of them would be in supporting roles, and that means that in reality, the French would probably have about 60,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine at any given time if they went all in, and then the rest of the French army would be supporting them. But 60,000 combat troops would be added on to what's currently in Ukraine. That would probably bode incredibly well too, considering that they're well equipped and well supplied, and not only that, have a very good organizational structure and a high level of training. We would probably see that French forces would bode incredibly well against their Russian counterparts, being able to inflict high casualties, and not only that, most likely conduct a great amount of decisive maneuvers, allowing them to threaten the Russian forces with encirclement and forcing them further back, meaning that over the fields of Ukraine, they could certainly gain massive amounts of progress. But whenever a city was reached, they would kind of end up running into the same problem that the Russians would. They would either have to maneuver around the city and encircle it and besiege it, or they would have to fight through the city, which is always going to just be a very tough and long battle. But if the Russians are demoralized by that point by being rapidly pushed back, there may not be any fight to be had inside the cities. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I got to thank you so much once again for asking a really interesting question. I hope that went down every single facet that I could answer on that question. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into Ukraine.
All right, and our final question of the segment is going to go to the channel legend Philip Fixes LSA, who says, I've heard reporting of Russia amassing nearly 50,000 soldiers near northern Ukraine, building a reserve, and have you heard anything on the subject?
I haven't heard anything about it. We have largely heard the Russian forces have moved out of Belarus and have started to move further down and into the area of the east and the south, and that was about a year ago. And I haven't heard anything else to contradict that at the moment. So going off of that, I would have to declare ignorance. If that is something that is actually happening, I'd have to declare ignorance because I haven't heard anything about that to suggest that there is a possible new Russian invasion that would be happening from the area around northern Ukraine. We generally believe they would not want to conduct that kind of an offensive because they'll be drawing away vital resources and logistics from the southern fronts that are already doing pretty badly, and they're hardly eking out any kind of success in those areas at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you so much once again, Philip Fixes, for being a legend and an old guard. And with that, it is time for us to get back into the Ukraine war frontline news, starting off with our location unknowns, where we got to see a really interesting bit about a new Russian hulls. This one appears to be a brand new design using girder mesh that you would use in concrete laying, and also some structural steel to put over the tank.
My God, then what is that, dog cages on the side?
Something like that, I would assume.
Just a junk pile.
Man, that's a literal junk pile, you know what I mean? Dude,
it's Sam from the sun.
That's terrible looking, and it's showing how bad off the Russians really are getting at this point. And moving on from that, we also got to see some Ukrainian soldiers celebrating Easter, because today is actually the Orthodox version of Easter, and we can see that many soldiers are celebrating all throughout the front lines of Ukraine. Check it out. Isn't that nice to see? Because a lot of people think that the Ukrainians actually had Easter a little while ago. They kind of just did that for PR reasons. They don't actually celebrate Easter the same time we do here in the West. They actually celebrate Easter based off of the Orthodox calendar, which means that I believe it's the first Sunday of every May. But still, nice to see them having their celebrations for Easter, and hopefully they had a great one today. Moving on from that and on into our next bit of news, we also got to see Russians continuing training. Observe.
Elite Russian mercenary in training.
Oh, it's
That's
elite.
hilarious.
When you see them hanging the mortar.
Да, громко.
Oh, he's got this.
И садись. Говори. Быстро. Красава.
Oh, he's just so happy about that. He doesn't know what's coming.
He does not know what's coming at all. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on to our next one, where we also get to see a picture of a ZSU-23-4 Shilka in Ukrainian service. Really cool to see these. Moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see a picture of a Ukrainian Mi-17 in service in the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Pretty cool to see. Moving on from that and on to our last bit of news, we got to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and it was high. Ooh!
Oh my goodness! And also, I see over there on the right, Miss Disa has a correction for us on the numbers there. Some adjustments, by the way, but still, nonetheless, we're over 2,000 bobcats. I'd love to see it. I think she said that there was a -3 bobcats though. Damn.
Dang, only one bobcat, but over the course of the past 24 hours, the Russian Federation has lost 860 troops wounded and killed, 23 armored personnel carriers, 64 artillery pieces, 2 MLRSs, 20 cruise missiles, 81 supply trucks, 1 special equipment vehicle, 25 drones. Let's see, let me make sure that we're getting this correct. Yeah, and that's everything, because I had to make sure to read off of Miss Disa, because Miss Disa is a channel legend, and also was able to make sure that the numbers were correct, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense as of today. So the losses were quite high, and are once again showing that the Russian Federation is taking a high amount of losses continuing on in this day of the war, and it doesn't appear that they're doing all too well. But with that, it's time for us to move on from the casualty report and on into the rest of the front lines that we've seen today. Starting off in Kremenna, we got to see that a Baba Yaga dropped a 100-kilogram bomb, 100 kilograms, onto the Russians. It did not explode, but this is the heaviest payload I've ever seen a Baba Yaga carry. It came through the roof, ended up landing right there.
Не, если вы хотите ускорить сборы, нахуй, как бы без проблем.
Oh damn, it messed up my papers, блядь. Who's gonna pay for this?
It messed up my baking ovens, bled. You can see my baking ovens back here. I put bread in the ovens, bled. But beyond that, pretty wild to see it didn't blow up, but that's also the biggest bomb I've ever seen carried by a Baba Yaga. 100 kilograms is really heavy. I'll put it into perspective. So 100 kilograms is 220 pounds. So this is carrying a full-sized man nowadays and just dropping it somewhere on the front lines, which is pretty nuts to see. Moving on from that and on to our next clip, we also got to see that the Ukrainian Shadow unit ended up blowing up a Russian tank today. Matthew, hit it with me. Shadow Wizard Money Gang, we love casting spells. Boom!
My mic didn't even pick up me saying it, man. I was doing the little sound effect. It didn't even pick it up.
Man, I didn't even hear it either, man. I was sitting over here like, I guess he's not helping me out here. But look at that tank. That thing is casting spells. And those spells are called naps. That tank is toasty.
Boom. Jaga jaga. I like where the like on the hot spots on the camera, it's like showing that little like still image. Do you see that? Like when they move the camera around, it's like some still image in the middle of the hottest spot.
Yeah, I'm noticing that. That is kind of cool, isn't it? It's like
Kinda
static
weird.
in there. Do you think Russia could fight a two-front war if it came to it? That's actually a pretty good question. We'll make sure to save that one for the question segment in a little bit. But we can
I think
see.
the bigger question is, can Russia fight a one-front war at this point? They're having a tough time with that.
Yeah, you know, I saw something today, Matthew, speaking of which, the U.S. military analyst said, oh, if Russia decides to invade the Baltics, it's going to take them 7 days to take over. NATO response time would be 10 days. Oh my God. And I was like, shut the hell up. I was like, you don't even know what you're talking about anymore. It's like, didn't y'all say that the Russians were going to win in a week? I swear, I remember Millie, and actually Jay Bagwell was able to help me out with this a very long time ago. We were able to find the news clip where Millie did say that Ukraine would be lost in 3 to 7 days. So people were saying that back then, and it's 802 days later. I'll be honest with y'all, I don't really think and this is going to be a bit of a hot take, but I don't really think military analysts know what they're talking about half the time. I think they just come up with crap out of thin air just so that way people will listen to them. I think that's honestly what it is, because they were completely wrong on the war in Ukraine. They were completely wrong in Iraq and Afghanistan. They've been completely wrong in a lot of places. So to hear them say that the Baltics would be taken over in 7 days, I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me. Like, it's like, oh, so taken over in 7 days, so no one gives any resistance at all. They just drive forward and we give up. It's like, come on. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see the Russians ended up hitting the Slavyansk thermal power plant near to the area of Kramatorsk today, or actually, I believe it's Slavyansk. But here's the clip. We see them zooming in the weirdest freaking way, because the top of the camera is oriented south in this picture, which makes no sense. But anyways, there's the power plant. You're about to see the Russians start shelling it to knock it out. And we can see that right there. Once again, the Russians are trying to knock out Ukrainian power infrastructure to try and force the Ukrainians out of the war due to not being able to keep up any kind of industry or even any kind of quality of life.
Also, by the way, I see folks talking about the experts in the chat. They're saying never trust someone who claims to be an expert. What really makes them an expert, like in that? Like seriously, like geopolitics, like you can know the basics, that's about it. But like to say you're an expert and then make predictions like this is going to happen just like this, and like they've been proven that they don't predict anything accurately, like the entire war. It's like, does anybody ever stop listening to them?
Well, with military, there are some people out there who can predict things properly, but it takes a lot of work and effort. A lot of military analysts, though, from what I've found, just pull stuff out of their ass with no backing at all and just run with it, and then people run with it too. And that's one thing I found really annoying when running this channel, is that we'll say something, and I'll say it, and I'm not an expert or anything, and I'm not an expert, I'm saying that truly, I'm not an expert. But I'll say something not as an expert, and I'll just base it off of like a historical analysis or something like that. And then sometimes it ends up being wrong, because over the past 2 years, more than 2 years, we have ended up getting some predictions completely wrong. But then some military analysts will come out there, pull something out of their ass, and they'll get everything wrong. And then people will come on here and argue with me in the live chat that I don't know what I'm talking about because so-and-so military analyst that gets everything wrong said I'm wrong. And it's like, I don't care what they say because they get everything wrong. So what does it matter what they say? At least I've gotten some things right in the past. That's what I'm going off of. Matthew's gotten things right in the past as well. So it's like, I don't really care what the military analysts say because they just don't know. The military knows. The U.S. Department of Defense knows incredibly well, though, how it would actually go in the Baltics if the Russians were to start a war, because there is a department in the military that does nothing but war game, which means that they pretty much play out every single scenario that they can with actual commanders that would be in charge of these divisions and units that would be in the area to see how a Russian force would fight and how the Western forces would fight and see how that would turn out. So the Department of Defense probably has a really good idea of what that war would look like in the Baltics, but a military analyst out of the blue just coming up with some random BS, they don't have a clue. And so
you'd have to have all the intel, like all the details behind the scenes to actually make a really accurate prediction. And I know those analysts that are on like CNN and Fox, they're probably not getting that information, like without a doubt. And also, I saw some like pro-Ukraine people. We're not going to mention any names here because that's not what we're trying to do. But some pro-Ukraine voices are still like adhering to what the experts are saying, the quote-unquote experts. I'm like, they apparently don't realize by adhering to basically listening to the experts' advice, you're conceding that Ukraine doesn't have a chance because the experts at this point are saying that Ukraine can't even mount an offensive. So it's like, you're listening to the expert, but then at the same time, you're basically saying, Ukraine's going to win. It's like you can't have it both ways. Either the experts are right, Ukraine's going to lose, or Ukraine's going to win and they're wrong. It's like you can't just say all the experts are right. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it doesn't. And also another thing that's really stupid as well is I don't know if y'all know this, but back in the Gulf War, back before the Gulf War began, military analysts in America were actually saying that Iraq was going to beat our ass because they had the third largest military in the world, and it was equipped with nothing but the greatest, googliest, moogliest, that thing is juicy Soviet equipment that the money could buy, which is true at the time. And then we ended up curb stomping them because we just war-gamed it into oblivion before it even happened, because Norman Schwarzkopf had that special kind of touch what was crazy, man, is that Norman Schwarzkopf was told, come up with a scenario that would be highly likely in the Middle East in the next few years, and war game that out as much as you can to figure out how the United States would end up winning that fight on the ground. And so his hypothetical scenario that he came up with is that Iraq would invade Kuwait and not let it go. So the United States would have to fight Iraq and defeat them to relinquish Kuwait from an illegal invasion and occupation. And so then, right after he got done going through that entire war game, which took an incredibly long time to figure out, I believe it was like a year or a year and a half or something, if I'm remembering the story correctly, 4 to 6 months later, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. The United Nations ordered him to release Kuwait from Iraqi occupation. Saddam Hussein refused, and then they said, oh my god, Norman predicted it perfectly. And then that's when he became the commander, the supreme coalition commander of forces in the Gulf War, and then ended up literally putting his war plan into action, which is what decisively defeated the Iraqis in the Gulf War in 1991. So it does show that they can have an idea of how this thing will turn out by wargaming it into oblivion, because they'll have the intelligence on the military level. But even back in the day, if you go back and look at the newspapers from 1990 and 1991, they were saying, if we go to war with Iraq, Iraq is going to beat the hell out of the United States. It's going to be a massive casualty war. It's going to be a massive slog. It's going to be worse than Vietnam. And they were completely wrong, because everyone always acts like the United States is like the underdog in the world for some reason, although we spend more on the military than the rest of the world combined. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, some people have been saying that Russia is planning to sabotage Western interests in covert attacks inside of the West. And a lot of people have been thinking about this. Some people have been saying that's going to happen soon. Some people are saying that's happening right now. And some people are in between. And Matthew, what are people saying about that? And what are you thinking about it?
So it looks like 44% of people says it's already happening right now, and Russia is sabotaging Western interest in covert attacks. And 37% said it will happen very soon, and 9% said it won't happen at all because the West can stop it. And I'm with the 44%. I think it's already happening right now, and it's simply not being reported on as Russian attacks. And it simply appears on the news as fires and also explosions at these military facilities, because we have seen the Scranton ammunition plant. It caught on fire. That was odd. And then also we saw in the UK something over there caught on fire, and then also Germany did as well. Those are not coincidences, and why would all the Western military facilities just all of a sudden start going up in smoke pretty much everywhere? That wouldn't make any sense to me, and I don't believe in coincidences. So I think Russia's out there actually doing this stuff. They're either getting their own covert operatives to do it, or they're recruiting other people to go in there that are insiders and carrying this stuff out. So it's not a matter of when, because it's already happening. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it's already been happening so far, and so I would have to say it's just continuing on, business as normal. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And it's time for us to move on into the area of Avdiivka, where we got to see some brand new medevac equipment of the Ukrainian armed forces. And so, without further ado, here is the video from United 24 on these brand new kinds of drones that they're using to help them out on the battlefield.
Ground robots that both attack and defend. Neural networks that demine the most mined country in the world. Drones invisible to the enemy, and radios that cannot be jammed by electronic warfare means. All of this is defense tech innovation originating from Ukraine. Imagine being attacked by an enemy 28 times larger. Can one withstand such a situation at all? Yes. If one unites with allies based on values and acts wisely. Very wisely. In Ukraine, defense tech innovations are developing rapidly. Numerous projects are being developed across the widest spectrum of directions within the Brave One defense tech cluster. Unmanned aerial vehicle, unmanned ground vehicle, artificial intelligence, electronic warfare, and much more. Remember R2-D2 from Star Wars? Well, meet its very distant relative, the D-2111 robot. This machine is equipped with an automatic turret and can conduct reconnaissance, assault, or defend positions, safely deliver supplies to the front line, and conduct evacuations. D-2111 is controlled by a human, but it can also calculate ballistic corrections on its own and help to determine its location. Essentially, it has artificial intelligence, albeit very primitive. Nonetheless, ground robots can save precious lives of Ukrainian soldiers and become the next game changer of this war, much like UAVs have already become. This is Ukraine's asymmetric response to the numerical superiority of the enemy. That said, nobody forgets about UAVs either. Currently, over 200 Ukrainian companies are involved in UAV production, and the successful operation of such drones is perhaps the most common type of video content from the war. Backfire is an autonomous reusable bombing UAV that flies silently, has a low visual profile, and is almost immune to jammers as it does not rely on a radio channel with ground control. Additionally, it can use almost any type of munitions. Part of the Backfire manufacturer team serves in the Angry Birds unit of the Ukrainian army. They already use their drone at the front line. Judging by the drone's performance, the team was satisfied with the tests. Over 100 successful combat missions, destroyed artillery, armored vehicles, electronic warfare and reconnaissance systems, and personnel deep behind enemy lines. However, the enemy also actively uses UAVs. Therefore, another focus of attention for Ukrainian developers is electronic warfare systems. The Pluton complex warns fighters about approaching UAVs and can be installed on both vehicles and stationary objects. Thanks to the algorithm that compares signals with the database, the probability of successful detection is 99.99%. Additionally, Pluton can distinguish not only the distance to the drone, but also its type. It is already being used by several units at the front line. There are also achievements in traditional military directions. A notable project that has won several technological awards in Ukraine is Chimera. It's a compact tactical level radio, nearly invisible on the air due to frequency hopping and low radio power. Moreover, it is composed of commercial components, making production simple and affordable. This solves the problem of using civilian radios on the front line, as they can be easily intercepted by the enemy. Additionally, Chimera can transmit not only voice but also data, making it applicable on the battlefield as part of the NATO C4ISR system: command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It utilizes a modern integrated approach, combining demining and AI. UA Damage is an automatic mine detection platform that uses a whole array of sensors. Machine learning helps automatically detect potentially hazardous objects, and the magnetometer provides data on any magnetic metallic objects weighing from 200 grams at depths up to 2 meters. According to developers, this system makes demining 10 times cheaper and 100 times faster. Considering that Ukraine is currently the most mined country in the world, UA Damage definitely has prospects. Moreover, this system can also contribute to global food safety, since the UA Damage neural
Wait a minute,
network
a
can
Caterpillar
determine from the
combine
traces-
harvester. Did I see that right? Wait a minute, go back.
Wait a minute, what? What the hell? Wait a minute,
I've never seen Caterpillar make a combine harvester before. That's different.
Me either. I thought they were entirely like a construction equipment company, you know?
Yeah, very, very interesting, man. It's like either super old or I've never seen it and somewhat new. I can't tell. Looks like it's been through the ringer a little bit.
Caterpillar combine harvester. We gotta go. What the hell? Wait a minute, are these things like actually common? Hold up. I think these things are legitimately just common.
How
Okay.
common are we talking?
2010, let's see, 2001, 2007, 2010, 2008, 2007. Let's see here. Can we get a history? Did Caterpillar, let's see. Wait, hang on. What? Hang on. Hold up. Wait a minute. Hold up. What? Hang on. 1930. Caterpillar began selling tractors and combine harvesters in Russia. Caterpillar is confirmed to be commie. They are communists, like 100%.
Uh-oh.
They're selling caterpillars to Russia in 1930. Yeah, good luck, Jack. More like the Soviet Union. More like red spies. More like call up the damn guy in the government, McCarthy, because he was right. He was right. These sons of bitches are coming. But anyways, let's see here. What else? Let's see.
Caterpillar, suka bliat.
Suka, блядь, пиздеки ты нахуй, блядь. Let's see. Did they make combines? I can't find if they're still making them now, but it looks like they may. Like, this may just be a normal thing for them. And so...
Interesting.
So, yeah, but still, I can't forgive them for being communist bastards. But anyways, with that, we're back to the video.
To global food safety, since the UI damage neural network can determine from the traces left by the flights what exactly exploded here and what contaminated the soil. This will allow better choices for plant and fields and ultimately faster restoration of Ukraine's agriculture, one of the planet's key grain actors. To more effectively implement defense tech innovations, exactly 1 year ago, 6 state institutions created the unique Brave One platform for the development of innovative defense projects. In just these 12 months, over 1,600 projects were submitted to the platform. 800 of them were granted Brave One status, meaning they passed military expertise and received comprehensive support from the cluster. As a result, the Ukrainian military continues to defend its land. And breakthrough defense tech projects allow them to do it even better and smarter.
And that's the end of that clip. But very interesting to see Ukraine once again giving us an update on them drones. Moving on from that and down into Bakhmut, we also got to see that some Russian armor was destroyed down E.
Peter, the Russian armor was blown up down here.
And here comes the
Peter,
drone.
A horse is here.
Peter, the horse is here.
Here in the wilds of Ukraine, we are seeing massive amounts of Russian armor being obliterated by the Ukrainian drones. These tanks
Wait a minute, Peter, I forgot. The horse is here again. Oh, look, Lois, it's just Lavrov. Hello?
Here in the in the wilds of Ukraine, was that supposed to be Peter Griffin?
Yes.
That just sounded kind of like you. Like it really did. I was sitting there, I was like, is
Lois.
Lois, give me a freaking beer. But it's something like that. It's like, I don't think that was Peter. I just think that was you, Matthew. I think it was you. But
Peter, the horse is here.
moving on from that, we're now moving on into the near to the area of Chasiv Yar, where we get to see a BTR-4 in training in the salt pits. Look at it go. Isn't that cool? Well, how neat. And they're learning and they're evolving. Very nice to see. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip and down into the Avdiivka area, where we got to see a Ukrainian firing an AGS-17. And here's the clip. No. And we're muting that. And we can see them now firing off the grenades. Boom, boom, boom. And that's the end of the clip. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip in the Bakhmut area, and we're now going to be moving on past the Avdiivka battlefield and down towards Krasnoarivka, where we got to hear that something very interesting happened today. And Matthew?
Peter, the Ukrainian is here.
This was a wild story. So apparently, as the story goes, this bastard was a local resident from one of the liberated territories. After the arrival of the Russian Federation, he signed a contract and joined the ranks of the Russian Armed Forces. Then he shot 6 of his colleagues, including his commander. After that, he made controlled shots to the head and heart and then ran away. Now they are looking for him. This is such bullshit, adds the Russian commentator. So this guy here in the picture was a local in the Donetsk Oblast, ended up obliterating 6 Russians after he got in the Russian army, and ran away. So this was a little bit of a wild story. And Matthew, I think this goes to show...
Peter, the Ukrainian is going off. Let the Ukrainian be freaking tweaking.
But still, This is quite crazy. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, down into the area of Uruzhane, where we got to see the Ukrainians were clearing out a minefield. Check this out. And also, let me make sure that I'm getting this correct. 1 second. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, this was a Russian APC, but I was going, wait a minute, that's a Ukrainian division emblem at the top corner. But here we... Oh! Oh my goodness! Oh! Obliterated to smithereens. And gone for good. Beautiful stuff. We love to see it. What?
The tank's blown up.
Hey, yo. Your Uber Eats is here. Wait, better yet. Hey, yo, who ordered the tannerite? Just so blow up like that. Oh, man.
Yo, Adrian, I did it.
Man, better yet. Hang on. Grubhub Perks gives you deals on the food you love. Oh, man. That was an impressive...
We have the meats.
Dude, better yet, man. When you're driving down the road on vacation and you've gotten 9 hours away from your house and you realize that you left the stove on.
I gotta say, though, that was probably a 10. Like, that was a pretty solid one right there. I'm giving that a 10 out of 10.
Dude, I'm gonna call this explosion the morning star. As in morning, as in the sun is rising, and morning as in these folks are going to have a closed casket funeral here. And so with that, we're now gonna be moving on from that little bit of news and out of this area of the front line and a little bit further down and into the area of Kherson, where we got to see that some Russians ended up getting blasted today. Check it out, would you? By the 123rd Brigade, we got to see this deer here holding this spear. This deer actually knows how to use tools. You can't say that for a lot of deers. You can't even say that for a lot of people. But check it out. We can see them dropping something in the water. It looks kind of like a bomb. And we can see them dropping the tow line as well. It looks like a mine. Oh my goodness!
Damn.
It was a mine. So that's what they did. They dropped this mine here, which really kind of just looks like a bomb, in the water. And then the Russians come scooting along. Scoot, scoot. Boosh! And then the whole boat goes up and some guys go and get flight miles. So overall, doesn't look like it was a good day for them down on the Dnipro River. Not a good day for the lake. Moving on from that and on up into the area of Ukraine, we got to see an Irish tea firing today. Call this thing iced tea because it be laying them out cold. But here's the clip. Oh, hang on. Let me go back and get that really quickly. There goes the missile. And that's the end of that clip right there. And moving on from that, we also got to hear a little bit about the air defense report over the past 24 hours as well, as 23 Shahed 136s were shot down. What a day. What a day. An incredible, amazing day. Moving on from that, it's now time for us to get on into Kyiv itself and go to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on day 802 of The Wire. And we also got to see that Zelensky is in his Easter attire. Oh, buddy, oh, boy. And so with that, oh, wait a minute. No. Wait. No, we want it here. Okay, there we go. Let's see here.
Give me a speech, please. And I want it in the right track.
We don't want it in that English. It's just going to be like, hello and happy Easter to you. It's going to sound like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood up in here, which is fine.
Hello. I'm spitting facts. Happy Easter. And facts and logic.
Happy Easter. Thanks. And also I have to tell you, it's in the name that we celebrate Easter because it's called Easter. Thanks. Hello. I'm going to go debate college kids now. Thanks. But anyways, here is the speech from Zelensky.
Великий народе великої України. Ми відзначаємо сьогодні велике свято – Воскресіння Господнє, Великдень. Великдень символізує звільнення душі людини від рабства, зла і темряви, перемогу добра і справедливості, перемогу життя над смертю. За все це ми боремось 802 дні. Поспіль. 802 дні, коли воля протистоїть мороку, доблесть протидіє терору. 802 дні нашого спротиву, які можна описати словами з Євангелія від Іоанна. А світло у темряві світить, і темрява не обгорнула його. Ці ж слова присвячені одній з виставок Софійського собору, де я знаходжусь зараз. Вона та інші роботи різних українських митців разом несуть в собі глибокий сенс. Це ікони на ящиках від боєприпасів, просочені димом нашої землі й духом нашого народу. Символи великих випробувань та великої сили, яка допомагає нам їх долати. Кожна з цих ікон немов божественний прояв, доказ того, що небо з нами, відповідь на питання, чому українці вистояли. Бо у найважчих обставинах і найтемніші часи ми здатні народжувати світло. На опалених вогнем і горем дошках зі змучених стражданнями українських міст та сіл, поєднуючи, на перший погляд, несумісне війну і Господа, перемагаючи зло вірою, перемагаючи біду надією. Вдивившись у ці ікони, можна зрозуміти почуття усього нашого народу, дзеркало, яке відображає нашу дійсність у часи війни. І вже пройдений шлях, і цей Великдень, і усе наше сьогодення. Саме так сьогодні виглядають наші обереги. Саме так сьогодні ми відчуваємо Бога, який захищає нас руками наших воїнів. Саме так ми бачимо заступництво небесних сил, втілене у силах безпеки і оборони України. Кожного українця і кожної українки, які віддають себе священній справі, оборона рідної землі від темряви і зла. На цих іконах імена героїв, які віддали життя, аби нас захистити, які показали, українці стають на коліна лише у молитві і ніколи перед загарбниками і окупантами. Біблія вчить нас любові до ближнього, а сьогодення показало нам справжнє значення цього слова. Коли навіть за сотні кілометрів один від одного ми підтримуємо, допомагаємо один одному, захищаємо один одного, молимось один за одного, коли всі ми стали один одному ближчими, один одному ближніми. А колишній сусід, що постійно набивався нам у брати, для нас далекий навіки. Він порушив всі заповіді, зажадав наш дім, прийшов нас вбивати. Світ бачить це, Бог знає це. І ми віримо у Бога на плечі шеврон з українським прапором. Тож з таким союзником життя точно переможе смерть. Долаючи спільний шлях, відчуваючи спільний біль, всіх нас об'єднує сьогодні одна спільна молитва за всіх наших бійців, що зустрічають Великдень в окопах і на позиціях, за наших воїнів світла, які стримують демонів на всіх напрямках, за тих, хто дотримується у житті ще однієї заповіді – захищати Україну, за те, щоб всі вони повертались живими. За всіх наших цивільних людей, які щодня важко, дуже важко працюють, аби держава була міцною, аби успішно долала нечисту. За тих, хто живе і працює для цього. За всіх наших дітей, не за віком, мужніх хлопчиків та дівчаток, у яких Росія вкрала дитинство, але які, попри все, не розучились посміхатися і вірити в диво. За всіх наших матерів і батьків, у яких забрали щасливу, спокійну старість, та які, попри все, тримаються, піклуються про нас. За всі наші міста і села, які повинні відчувати Господню благодать, а не постійний терор зла, над якими нависли чорні хмари і летять бомби і ракети тих, кому місце в пеклі, а не в українському небі. За наші землі, наших людей, чий дух не зламати, пам'ятаючи слова, які написані у Софії над Орантою, які справдилися у нашому житті. Бог серед міста, і воно не похитнеться. Бог допоможе йому перед світанком. Сьогодні наша молитва за всіх українців, які чекають саме цього світанку і неодмінно побачать його, дочекаються миру, правди і Бога, який повернеться на випалену землю, всіяну шрамами у вигляді воронок і траншей. Повернеться тишею, спокоєм, квітами замість мін на полях. Повернеться дитячим сміхом замість реву повітряної тривоги. Світло, яке повернеться на всю нашу Господом дану землю, на всі території, які чортами тимчасово окуповані. Бог повернеться в Маріуполь, на терикони, узбережжя морів. Так завжди було. Так точно буде. Я вірю в це щодня, а особливо в цей великий день у цьому великому місці, історія якого нагадує ні ординська навала, ні нацистська окупація, ні російський терор не зможуть стерти нас з лиця землі. Нехай небеса зміцнюють нашу волю у битві проти неволі, дадуть мужність для нових здобутків і мудрість, аби цінувати все, що вже здобули, силу, щоб зберегти єдність, єдність, щоб примножити силу. І нехай всім, хто віддав життя за Україну, Бог подарує вічний спокій їхнім душам і вічний мир їхнім нащадкам, усім нашим дітям та онукам, усім нашим майбутнім поколінням, які мають святе право знати, що таке мирний Великдень у мирній Україні. Сьогодні ми молимось за це і боремось за це, а світло у темряві світить. Зі святом усіх вас, дорогі українці, Христос воскрес, воістину воскрес.
Героям слава!
And Героям слава! And with that, that is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that is moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all. We also get to call out the remainder of the top donors in between the last segment and this one that we've not been able to call off, and thank you all for y'all's massive support to the fundraiser tonight and helping to save the children, not just around the world, but particularly in Ukraine. And also, we get to talk to each and every one of y'all about whatever the hell we can come up with to talk about, which is incredibly fun because usually it's something very interesting. So, Matthew, could you, may you, possibly may you, take this away?
Peter, the last question segment here. But anyways, we have a couple of top donors since the last time we called them off. And we have a $100 donation from Snow White, as well as a $125 donation from Barry Woodward. So, huge shout out to Snow White and Barry very much for the generosity and bringing us up to $5,115 raised in total. And once again, like we said earlier, huge shout out to everyone that donated tonight, because it always makes it possible when everyone throws in even smaller amounts to get to the goal. And even like tonight, way above the goal, about 2,100 above it, and that is tremendous to see. And once again, a huge shout out to everyone for that. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, huge thanks to each and every one of y'all, once again, for helping out this fundraiser to get to where it is. It has gotten to $5,115. And it wouldn't have been able to get a single dollar if it wasn't for all of y'all helping out tonight and having a massively generous heart and wanting to help out save the children. It is truly an incredible thing to know that the Lee Spring Army is able to continue to blow past fundraiser goals week after week, year after year. Every single Sunday. It is truly unbelievable. It's truly incredible. And I got to thank y'all greatly so much once again for helping to make this fundraiser possible again tonight and helping the Lee Spring Army to continue to be a force of good around the world. The Lee Spring Army's flag will continue to fly high, and everyone will know what the Lee Spring Army is and what we do. And so with that, put an LSA in the chat, and we are going to be moving on into the rest of the questions that we can answer tonight. And so with that, we are on to the first one.
All right, and our first question I actually just saw in the live chat. It comes from Arthur, and he says, may we talk about Israel possibly invading Rafah soon? And Arthur, what we know so far about that is actually a decent bit. We are getting word that the negotiations between Israel and also Hamas have basically fallen apart, according to all the reports we've heard. And I believe the CIA director from the United States has been sent into, I believe it's Qatar, to go down there and try to smooth things over to hope the negotiations can start back up. But I really don't have much faith in that because Hamas has already resumed attacking Israel while these negotiations are still like barely on the verge of collapse and barely hanging on. So it sounds like to me the Rafah invasion is imminent. That's the way also the government in Israel seems to be making it sound like. It sounds like that's pretty much a done deal at this point. And to be honest, it sounds like Israel is honestly raring to go. They want to go in there and do that. They're getting tired of Hamas and also the proxy groups attacking their country. And really, it's about time that something is done, in my opinion. I hope the civilian casualties are not too bad because, of course, there are a lot of civilians there. And I'm not sure how the Israelis are going to avoid that. But if they can avoid the civilian casualties, Hamas really does need to get taken out. It's about time. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say the same thing that Matthew said about what we know is going on in the area. We do know that the ground invasion of Rafah will be happening soon, and we also understand that a ground invasion of Lebanon may be happening very soon as well, maybe identically to the time window that the invasion of Rafah will be happening. So far, the Israelis pretty much occupy the entirety of the Gaza Strip except for Rafah, and currently that's where Hamas forces have moved. They've continuously moved further south with the refugees, pretty much blending in with them, from the area of Gaza down to Han Yunis and now down into Rafah. So it seems as though the Israelis are going to occupy the entirety of the Strip, try and wipe out Hamas as best they can, and then leave. That's what we're thinking they're going to be doing at the moment. I would say that it's, of course, something they have to do. They have to end up eventually eliminating these Iranian-backed terrorist groups that surround them inside of the Gaza Strip, inside the West Bank, and also inside of Lebanon. So we will be waiting to see how that goes. But Matthew largely hit everything dead on the nail. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from, let's see here, it's in the spreadsheet, and I wanted to grab it. Let's see here. It goes to John Brewer, and also Kaltenberg pointed out this question earlier as well to answer it. John said, how many troops does NATO have as a whole?
NATO has an unbelievably large amount of troops. Let me go get that number. NATO troop number. So, NATO as an entire military alliance has about 3.4 million active military personnel versus Russia's, at the moment, I believe it would be around 1.1 or 1.2 million active military personnel. So, in the numbers aspect, we beat them out incredibly. Really, to be honest, this is something that actually shocks a lot of people because in most people's minds, they translate the size of a country on the map to being the amount of power that a country has. Because I remember this, and I know that a lot of people still have this mindset. When I was in school, a kid would go up to the map would look just like this. And they would go up to the map, and they'd look at it. And then they'd go and say this out loud. Wow, Russia is such a big country. They have to be like the strongest one in the world. And it's like, no. It's like, no, Indonesia is stronger than Russia is in reality because they actually have enough usable land. Literally all their land's usable. But beyond that, that was always something weird to me. And that's something that I have to put out. Just because Russia is big doesn't mean that it's powerful. Let me show Germany population. Yes, the Germans, which have had really no population change since 1970. Of course. And then we'll compare this to Russia, and we'll go down to the population. And so the Russians have a population of 144 million, and the Germans have a population of 84 million. Now, that seems like a little bit of a disparity, because it seems like the Russians have about a 1.7 times the population of Germany. But one thing that's interesting there to point out, this is something very interesting to know, okay? Russia is multiple times larger than Germany, but they only have about 1.7 times, 70% more population than the Germans have. And that's something that not a lot of people look at and not a lot of people translate too well. Also, another thing that's pretty shocking when you think about it and when you look at it is that the Germans have a GDP of around 4.1 trillion, and Russia has a GDP of 2.2 trillion. So Germany is twice the size of Russia economically. And they also have about let's see what it would be, like the 35% less population than the Russians, something along that line. So going off of that, you can already see alone the Germans on an economic level would end up giving the Russians probably an ass beating, as long as they were able to make sure that they would outspend the Russians, which they could. They could beat the Russians to hell and back at this point in modern history if it was not for nuclear weapons, and they would end up winning on their own. So with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here, which is also a pretty interesting one, is from Hodos, who says, what allows the best survivability, the Chinese golf cart or the motorbike? And also, Enforcer, do you have a photo of the Chinese golf cart, by the way? I want to see that thing up close if we have it. But honestly, though, between the two options, I'm going with a motorbike 100%. I don't want to be caught on a Chinese golf cart ever. If I'm going to get taken out, take me out on the bike. Don't take me out on that abomination of a golf cart. But let's see if you have a photo, Enforcer. I got to see this.
Meep, meep.
Oh!
Oh, yes, sir. Can you imagine your last moments being caught on that thing? I couldn't imagine.
Dude, this thing is worse than an EasyGo golf cart in appearance. And EasyGo isn't like the best looking thing out there, but look, they painted it in black in this picture to try and make it look cooler, but it still looks like a stupid go-kart. Like, oh, how stupid.
What's up with the front end on that thing, man? It's like they tried to it's just like a straight up flat front end on it, and it's got like the Jeep grill slats in the middle of it. It's like it's just rough.
或者吧是吧？会是吧？冰淇淋，是不是吧？冰淇淋。I mean, this ain't great. That ain't hot. And I'm gonna have to say, it's bad. That's all I can really say about it. I think Matthew hit everything on the nail pretty well with his description of the Desert Cross. But to answer your question, what would be better survivability wise? A motorbike would be better than this thing survivability wise, in my opinion, hands down every day. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Neil Vizanon, and he has another question about NATO. He says, how many nations exactly are in NATO right now?
That's a good question. How many countries are in NATO? And so, how many countries are in NATO? That's actually a frequently asked question on the internet. So, there are 32 member countries, and they are as follows. Albania, Belgium, Bulgaria, Canada, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Montenegro, the Netherlands, North Macedonia, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So those are all 32 member countries. So pretty much most of Europe, if not all of Europe, except for Ireland and Austria, and also Serbia, and then some countries across the seas, like Canada and the United States, and also the UK, which is an island, which is pretty cool. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, Richard Hawkins threw in 100. Killing it!
Let's go! I'm telling you what, Richard Hawkins coming in and bringing us up to $5,215 on the fundraiser, saving the children big league.
Amazing. And with that, I hope we were able to address both of those things incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one here is going to go to Fighting Finn, who says, could Ukraine make their own A-10-like drone, and what kind of weapons could it have?
Ooh, they could try. They're not going to be able to put a 30mm Gal Avenger gun on that drone, but they could try and, well, I don't think you actually make it a drone an A-10 Warthog or even close to it. But you could try and Baba Yaga it, make it where it can carry a 220-pound bomb. You could do that. But beyond that, there's not really a lot I think you could do to make it like an A-10, because it's not like it's going to be firing laser-guided weapons or anything like that, or gliding dumb bombs or something like that. So I'd say maybe Baba Yaga is the closest thing that you can get to it, but you're never going to be able to make a drone like an A-10. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I got a quick question for the audience. Have you ever been watching a YouTube stream called The Enforcer and wanted to see a marmot? Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button and pull up Alan.
Alan!
Peter, Alan's here.
Alan! And then, one second, we got to see if we can load in quick tonight. Come on, hurry. We got to get it up. The crowd's going crazy.
Oh, where's it at?
Oh, hello there.
Oh, hello. Are you? Would you like a rock? Would you like 3 plums or grapes? It could be either one.
And it's beautiful. That cake, that plum, and that rock.
Marmot's caked up, man. Goodness gracious, that marmot's caked up. Do you see that fly? Is he still here? There he is. Look at him. He's still down there.
1 second. Hang on, Matthew. Let's listen really closely. I think we might be able to hear something. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry. He's not even here anymore. So that's just a whoops.
I didn't know. That damn fly. Brush him away. Shoot. You'll do what you're told.
You'll do what you're told. Another 5-day vacation for 2 days of work. Call this man Amish. But anyways. Oh, man. And I know.
Give him that 1-day work week, man. Give him that 1 day.
Oh, man. I live for the communist utopia or some shit like that. I don't have to work anymore or anything. Oh, man. But beyond that, the marmot works hard. The marmot is always at work. It's on that grind every day. It's grinding that rock with the plums. Actually, the plums with the rock. It's at the mill, and it's just working incredibly hard. And I gotta say that it is beautiful to see Alan the Marmot here tonight. And someone said, "Oh shit, disrespectful." No, like honestly, it's honestly not even disrespectful, because the fly, aka Hot Dog Man, is like taking a whole other week off again. Like, we're not even kidding. Like, people are actually starting to get concerned for this hot dog seller's well-being. Like, people are wondering, where's the guy at? And I promise y'all this. I bring up those airline tickets. We're going to have him back on air. But anyways,
you know what would be better than the Hot Dog Man taking off 6 out of 7 days of the week? If he just went ahead and took off that extra day as well and just called it quits on YouTube. That would be the best thing in the world.
That would be the best thing. I mean, honestly, we would be very happy to see it. I mean, who wouldn't be happy to see that? Because hell, I mean, how in the world, y'all, is Ukraine going to survive without Hot Dog Man causing a fight with everyone in the Ukraine war community? How in the world will Ukraine survive without that? Probably a lot better. So, I mean, hey, if he gets off, I mean, he gets off. If he dies, he dies. Like Draco from Rocky, Matthew, you know what I'm talking about, you know? You just sit there and look at the camera. If he quits, he quits. And that just is what it is. But anyways.
No, Adrian, I didn't do it.
Yo, Adrian, I quit it. Oh goodness, we get such a laugh out of that. We get such a laugh. I hope y'all all get laughs out of it. And also, I see how long can one survive? Oh my goodness, Matthew. Oh my goodness, brutal. How long can one survive in the cellar smoking crack? Oh my god, goodness. Oh my goodness, that was a bad one. Like, goodness. But anyways, I gotta say that is something right there, man. that is a good question. How long can one last down there? And eventually, do the vapors catch up to you or not? Like, I'm very interested in that. And also, Steven Gerrard said, "I must break you." But beyond that, I gotta say, thank you all so much once again for wanting to see the Marmot. We love the Marmot. The Marmot is a wonderful moment of reprieve on these streams, and if it wasn't for the Marmot, how insane would we really be? I mean, we're already almost there, almost completely insane. How crazy would we be if we didn't get the emotional support Marmot? I mean, mental health is very important, and y'all all know how big of a proponent I am on mental health. That's why I run myself into the ground just running this thing 6 days a week. So, but beyond, I'm just kidding. I love doing this. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And of course, Matthew, someone came in and said, "Ukraine news? Did you miss the part
it's over.
where
it's
I
over,
said
buddy.
It was the question segment?" Like I always say this every night. I know I said this tonight. This segment is not news. Like, the news was literally the past hour and 40 minutes of the first part of the stream. So you've got your news, like an hour and 40 minutes of it. You can't even get that much raw news on CNN or Fox. You get like 30 minutes a day, and then they talk about that 30 minutes of news for like 23 and a half hours of the rest of the day. So you got your news. We're in the question segment now. We're just chit-chatting with people, talking about what they want. The marmot, their towns, hood reviews, anything. I mean, literally anything. But, you know, it's not the news. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are now going to be moving on out of the marmot and on into the next one. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our next question here goes to W13RD guy, and he put in a good question as well. He said, is Ukrainian/Western artillery production going to be equal to Russian production anytime soon?
It could if we rapidly bumped it up, but at the moment I don't think it is, and I don't think there's enough movement forward in that regard to be able to match Russian artillery production in the future. But that's fine because we do have a massive amount of stockpiles to feed the Ukrainians, which would allow us time to massively ramp up arms industry production. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in a very concise form. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Andrew W. And that's Andrew for the win, or it could be Andrew L. Yeah. Andrew for the loss. But it's Andrew W. He says, do you think the horse, the Russian horse, do you think it'll be roasting hot coming around to that summer weather?
Oh my, I didn't even think about that, Matthew. That thing is literally going to become an oven, like cooking the whole tank once you get in there. That is, I think people will die from heat exhaustion in those tanks in the summer. So I think the armor will end up being impractical, because I don't think that Soviet tanks have air conditioners. I think they only have heaters. So yes, they will die. Millions will die inside of that tank, because it's going to become an air fryer. And so with that, I hope that does answer that well, and we are on to the next one.
In our next one here goes to O-Tubes, who says, do you think there is a terrorist threat likely when the Paris Olympics are on?
There's always a terrorist threat to large events. That's generally why, like, just to give you all an insight into my personal life, I avoid incredibly large events, because there's always a threat of a terrorist attack happening, because terrorists feed off of causing terror, and what better way to cause terror than attacking mass gatherings of people? So, yes, there will be a risk of terrorist attacks happening during the Paris Olympics, not from the Russians, or not just from the Russians. It could be terrorist attacks from anyone, anywhere. It's a serious thing to be concerned about, and something that always creates the need for massive amounts of security inside of any kind of a major event, especially the Olympics in the modern day. And so I would say, yes, there is most likely going to be a massive concern for terrorist attacks happening on the Paris Olympics, and hopefully they'll be able to have a large enough amount of security that people are, incredibly, at least secure in their minds about things not happening. But still, one thing that's really interesting, and I'm still trying to look into this, hopefully someone can find me an answer really quickly. Did they clean up the Seine where it's actually clean enough to swim in? Because that was the whole big thing that they were supposed to be doing for this Olympics coming up in 2024, to really show off how advanced France is getting, that they would be able to clean up the Seine River and make it swimmable. So let me know if they did that, because I've been trying to find news on that and I haven't been able to. And I would say that would be really sad if they were not able to clean up the Seine. Although I kind of understand, because there's a river in the middle of Paris, and all the shit in the city ends up washing into the river whenever there's like a flood. So yeah, I mean, like, I could get it if they didn't clean it up, but I'm hoping they did, because it'd be cool to see people swimming in the Seine River, because no one's been able to do that, I think, since hell, like the 11th or 12th century, I believe. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. But before we move on to that, I also wanted to show y'all something incredibly interesting, which are these massive boulevards that many of y'all know about. But check this out. Look at this. Isn't this just cool? These massive wide streets. Isn't this?
It looks like somewhere where like maybe Mission Impossible might have been filmed or something like that. I think actually it was filmed around here somewhere. I can't recall what street though.
But I love these massive streets. I think they're beautiful. And y'all know something? A quick little rabbit hole I wanted to share with y'all. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Just moving on from the random FDR insert in the middle of Roosevelt, whatever you want to call him. But right there, that metro station is called the Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Franklin D. Roosevelt. That's very interesting. What's he, just like right in the middle of the intersection? What kind of intersection is this, by the way? Let's see. Can I see that on the ground?
It is a intersection roundabout. That's what this is.
Oh my god, that looks like hell.
Oh
like
my
there's no
God.
lines on the road. What the hell is this, man? It's like a free-for-all.
This would be chaos. Oh my God. Like, dude,
Did you imagine Alabama drivers going around this?
Dude,
They would have a melee
this.
going on in that. Oh my god, man.
Dude, I even hear that in Paris, this is considered like the Thunderdome of traffic in the whole country, is all of these avenues feeding into the single boulevard, and then everyone getting into a slaughterfest to try and get out of it. This is something I'm scared of. I'm actually terrified of this. But I want to share with y'all something cool about Paris. Paris's design and its street layouts is actually fairly modern. I bet many of y'all don't know that, unless if you're from Europe. Because a lot of people think that Paris is a medieval city, and in some cases it is. But they actually ended up tearing down a lot of Paris as it existed in the Middle Ages, and ended up broadening and widening a lot of the streets, so that way they could make these beautiful sight lines and other things to beautify the city. Paris is one of the few cities in the world that actually did something along those lines during the 19th century. A lot of them tried and a lot of them failed. New York City is actually one that got really close, Central Park being a holdover from that design concept. And also the way the streets are literal perfect grids and lines. That's also another thing where they well, I don't know if that was really beautification or more so a utilitarian mindset that they had with that, but the beautification side came with Central Park. But there was another city that was going to do that as well, which is Chicago. And Chicago never did it well, I guess is the best way to explain it. But they tried a little bit, and it did not work. Mainly because the guy who came up with the design for the city ended up not really being able to secure enough monies to be able to make that possible. And also on top of that, the city planners of Chicago just said, whatever, it'd be a lot better to just be incompetent and let the city grow however it grows and just sporadically add stuff on instead of city planning. So to hell with you, weird guy coming up with this cool design. But Chicago would have actually had the same layouts of street works that Paris had, with the wide boulevards and the beautification and everything. So it would have been the Paris of the Midwest, which is a really cool thing to think about, but then it never came to being. Let me see if I can actually find y'all, like, Chicago, let's see here. Chicago city plan. And let me see here if I can find it really quickly. So let's see, community. Oh, here we go. I think this was it. Yes. Oh, so, okay, so if I go to images here, I can actually find this. So this was the way that the city plan for Chicago existed. The map is a little small, but y'all will be able to tell what it is. That was the plan. There was going to be a wide boulevard going from the harbor straight into the middle of the city. There was going to be an administrative building here, the city hall, and then all of the streets were going to spread out like spider webs in these big avenues, and it was going to be gorgeous. And the whole entire city was going to be planned out with a similar theme of an architectural design. They were going to have these beautiful piers out here for the ships coming in and out of the Great Lakes. It was going to be truly amazing. The only part they implemented of this whole thing was this one end of the pier right here. This is the only part I believe that exists. Well, actually, no. Correction. It actually existed all the way from here, right there, all the way over to here. But this one ended up getting shortened down, and this was all a part of the World's Fair right through here, because Chicago actually had the World's Fair right in this area. And then once the World's Fair left, the groundworks remained, but nothing else from the city plan was ever implemented. But this is a design theory here, an illustration of what the city would have looked like if they had followed the plan. And it would have looked really pretty. I mean, it would have been gorgeous looking. But they never went with it. But that's a cool little fun fact about Paris, is that it did inspire other cities to try and beautify or massively city plan, which I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan of cities being well planned out and having a lot of beautification put into them, just as a kind of like a quality of life thing. But, sadly, they never went with it. But still a cool fun fact about, a rabbit hole about Parisian street layouts and city planning. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question here goes to Rosalie Wolleman. And Rosalie is getting kind of dark, so get prepared for this. Rosalie says, so Enforcer Matt, you asked for questions, so here's one. I'm going to lay it on you. It says, what do they do with all the dead bodies on the battlefield since 400,000 Russians have been killed?
Most of them rot.
Oh.
And so with that, I hope we answered that fairly well. There's not really a lot more for me to add there. They honestly literally just rot where they are most times. They never get recovered. And the Ukrainians don't recover them anymore either, for the most part. So they just let them rot as well. So if you're a Russian and you die, you just kind of rot. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
And our next question here is going to Geek Hippie, and thank you very much for that good comment here. They said, comment on Rheinmetall announcing major ammo supply for Ukraine in 2024.
So from what we've heard, Rheinmetall is one of the big companies that is trying to get involved in supporting Ukraine with equipment, and I believe this is actually part of the German war industry movement because Krauss-Maffei-Wegmann, which is the major manufacturer of German tanks and armed vehicles or armored vehicles, is also trying to move into producing a large amount of vehicles to sell to Ukraine, not for the Germans to give to Ukraine, but for Krauss-Maffei-Wegmann to sell to them. So going off of that, I would have to say, it just seems to me like a large German war industry push to get involved in the war and get a little bit of money out of it. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And also, K. Bell said Ukraine tries. Not really. They don't really try to recover the Russians anymore because the amount of bodies is so voluminous in any given area. It's really a insurmountable task to even deal with recovering a lot of those bodies, and on top of that, they already have their hands full just making sure that they recover Ukrainian remains. So with that, they don't really recover a lot of them, if any of them for that matter. They just end up rotting where they are. And that's why back in the Battle of Avdiivka, particularly back when the battle was actually around the city, the amount of bodies in some places were so high that we actually showed on this channel that the Russians were using dead Russian soldiers as sandbags in some defensive positions because there's just so many of them. But with that, I hope that does address that well. I hope I was able to just nonchalantly talk about one of the horrors of war. It kind of describe what it really is like out there. And someone said the smell must be horrendous. Yes, it is very horrendous from what we've heard. The smell is as bad as it was in any part of a major battle in World War II. It is just incredibly bad. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. We are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this question goes to James Green. He says, what's the story about the 6,200 Russian soldiers freed by Ukraine?
Freed by Ukraine?
I hadn't heard that one.
I haven't heard that one either. So unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that one in the moment because I have not heard anything about that story. And so with that, I hope that does kind of lack an answer to that fairly well. I hate to say that, but I haven't heard about that at all. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to Plant Lady, who covers something I don't think we covered tonight because it was a little bit dark. But Plant Lady said, I'm saddened to hear that Russia is threatening Ukrainian parents by taking away their children if they haven't applied for Russian citizenship. And what say you?
I say it's absolutely heinous to try and threaten the division of families to force people into getting Russian citizenship, which then means that the Russians on a official level have sovereignty over those people and get to decide their fates. I think that's incredibly sick. We actually covered that yesterday. We actually have the marker right in the city of Luhansk, and it is terrible to hear something like that. I think it's a crime against humanity, and any of the Russians who are a part of that, or anyone in the Russian government who facilitated that happening, including Putin, should be held responsible if the chance ever arises. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Mad Machine, who says, could Ukraine make RC-controlled kamikaze shrapnel drones to help clear out the orc trenches?
Yes, they actually have tried to do that in the past. Usually it's just with direct impact weapons, though, like RPG warheads. But you could try and create shrapnel bombs. Well, really all bombs end up becoming just a cloud of shrapnel. But you could try and make a special kind of a shrapnel or cluster bomb to drop from the bottom of a drone that could do that as well. So I think they should try and look into something like that because all it could do is help out a little bit more or just do the same that other kind of weapon systems have done. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all so much for watching this channel tonight and enjoying our news. And not only that, helping us to get the fundraiser up to $5,265 for Save the Children. An absolutely insane amount, and helping out massively and helping Save the Children continue its operations around the world and also inside of Ukraine, where they've been helping out massively. Of course, I gotta also say thank you to the 8.1 thousand people who were here at the peak tonight and the 48,000 people who've watched the stream up until this point. We are always honored to have each and every one of y'all pick us as y'all's source of news, and for us to be able to share the news that we would be covering each and every day with y'all. I'm glad that y'all made the decision to be here, and I thank y'all so much for joining us again tonight. If y'all did enjoy, make sure to subscribe, because we run this 6 days a week, every single day but Monday, and also make sure to like the stream. It's gotten up to 2,700 likes. We could probably get up to, oh, I don't know, 4,000 to 5,000, you know, maybe. But make sure to, oh my. But make sure to hit the like button, because we greatly appreciate that, and it makes us really happy. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. And like the Enforcer said, a huge shout out to everyone tonight for getting us up to almost $5,300 raised for Save the Children. A tremendous task is done once again tonight, and thank you all once again for that. And be sure to join us on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for another night of news. So with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, and we'll see you all next time. And of course, remember, the hot dog man will do what he's told. And good night.
Yes.